This is a world where the strong drink blood and the weak are the ones forced to spill it. Honestly, the real world is not much different. We open on a deep forest, pitch black at night, and right in the middle of it, our young protagonist is pulling back the string of a bow, locked in on a wild reindeer. An old man stands beside him, telling him to take the shot the way he was taught. The second he lets the arrow fly, a loud sound echoes through the forest and scares everything. Not just the birds, but the reindeer too. Unluckily, this dude does not miss the target, but he does snap his bow. The old man named Joseph, who acts exactly how you would expect an old man to act, starts yelling at him and says he told him to catch the prey, not break the bow. He already knew this was coming the moment he saw him trying to learn hunting, because this clearly is not his lane. After all, the kid is a noble, so the old man questions why he suddenly wants to become a hunter when he should be learning swordsmanship instead. The boy then thinks to himself that swordsmanship does not make money unless he actually lands a job first, and right now he needs money just to survive in this messed up world. Let us introduce our protagonist. His name is Kim Johan, and he was reincarnated into this world after a freak accident. Being born in a noble family was a great start, but right now he is dead last in the hierarchy. He does not have inheritance or succession, and he will be lucky if he is not stripped naked and thrown out in the middle of his brother's power struggle. The world he is in is the medieval era. As our guy and the old man walk forward, they notice a pack of wolves feeding on something. Our boy fires a badly aimed crooked arrow to scare the wolves away, and then he sees they were feeding on a corpse in a gruesome state. Johan wonders if the dead body belongs to someone from their village, and the old man says it is impossible to tell now because of how badly he was eaten. However, one thing is certain, and it is that the weak are merely prey for the strong. Johan cannot help but accept that fact, and he decides he will avoid becoming prey with money. He is a modern-day man after all. When he arrived in this world, he hoped some incredible superpower would awaken in him, and waited for a typical isekai window to pop up. But then he realized there was no such thing, and changed his objective. With money he can escape the estate, and he could become a merchant, or even a free peasant. Earning money is basically his mantra for living this life. Anyways, the old man happens to find a little devil herb, and he mentions that it is quite rare and has excellent homeostatic and stimulant properties. Johan is really thirsty for money, so he plucks the herb right away because it can be expensive if it is rare and has such excellent effects. As our guy stuffs the herb into his bag, the old man notices a bag dropped on the ground and tells him he might have dropped it, but our boy denies it. And as the old man wonders who else could come into this forest, they hear someone shrieking out loud. They both run toward the scream and see a little girl climbing up a tree while a pack of wolves roars at her from below. She is scared as hell, and why would she not be? Because this is the kind of situation that turns anyone blue with horror. The old man recognizes her as Dell, Robert's daughter, and wonders what she is doing deep in the forest. The wolves turn toward them with fierce looks, and old man Joseph gets terrified because they cannot handle these wolves alone. But our protagonist is a Pookie and runs toward the wolves without a second thought. He tells old man Joseph to grab Dell and run while he distracts the wolves. Old man Joseph cannot believe Johan is risking his life to save a commoner. However, our protagonist has other plans, and he thinks to himself that if he had known there would be this many wolves, he would have learned hunting sooner. There are at least 10 of them, and if he sells their pelts, he can make a massive fortune. While roaring like a typical protagonist, he pulls out a sword that looks more like a plastic one than something a noble guy should have. As he charges forward, the wolves rush toward him with fierce fangs. One wolf jumps at him and bites down on his sloppy sword with its pointed teeth, breaking the sword in one shot. As our protagonist panics, another wolf strikes at his neck from the side. Guys, is this the end of the story when it just started? At the same time, in Baltradin village of the Ites territory, the Ites family is out doing an inspection of the village, and the place is basically a poor slum. Lord Gessen Itesitz comes off like a complete scumbag right away, and he complains that it is as filthy and stinking as ever, which is crazy when the village is literally his responsibility in the first place. His concubine, Madame Itesitz, acts just as bad, covering her nose while looking down on the villagers like they are beneath her. And the eldest son, Philip Itesitz, is not any better since he does not even bother looking at the people because his superiority complex is that deep. Philip then says Johan is nowhere to be seen, and mentions that he abandoned his post during the territory inspection, so he asks if they should send soldiers to go bring him back. Gessen, who is drunk and acting sloppy, just brushes it off and says nothing good would come from finding that lunatic Johan, and then he runs his mouth even more by saying that if Johan goes off and drops dead somewhere like his mother, it is none of his concern. Out of nowhere, his eyes land on a pile of straw stacked near the village entrance, and he asks the villagers what that is supposed to be. An old man tells him it is the aftermath of Johan's training, and since it looked bad they covered it up, but Gessen instantly mocks the idea and says a worthless maggot like Johan cannot train. Even so, the second he looks past the straw, his expression flips because behind it he sees a line of fallen trees with a crushing punch mark carved through them, and now even he cannot pretend he is not shocked. On the other hand, one wolf is clamped onto Johan's arm and keeps struggling to bite through it, but it still cannot pierce his skin no matter how hard it tries. Johann just swings his arm, which is straight up built different, throws the wolf off, and gets back on his feet, while realizing that fighting with a sword is clearly not his thing. So this time he is going with his own style. This is the law of the jungle, and he already knows the rules by now. If you want to avoid becoming prey in this era, you need money, and if you want to earn that kind of money, you need power that goes way beyond normal human strength. It turns out Johann might actually have that kind of monster-level power in his fists, because once he starts throwing punches, he drops the wolves one after another in a single hit. Old man Joseph is completely stunned, with his jaw on the floor and his eyes wide, after seeing Johann show that much raw power out of nowhere. He cannot even process what kind of strength this is, and at the same time he is already wondering how much all of this would be worth, which is honestly a very him reaction. The wolves that came in looking savage now start panicking and backing off like scared little cats, because the fight flips hard the moment Johann locks in. So yeah, our guy is not as pathetic as he looked in the beginning, and now the only question is how crazy his potential is going to get from here. Johann is nothing like those cliché Sekai heroes who get a cheat skill and reign over the land. Our poor Johann has gone through a lot of bad fate from his childhood, and life was anything but easy. He was born as an illegitimate son of Gessen, and for a sin he did not even commit, he was bullied by his brothers. They constantly tormented him, flaunting their status and spewing insults and violence. The poor baby was left with tears in his eyes, and he naturally began to realize how brutal this world was. The only thing he could trust was himself, so he started thinking what he needed to live in this medieval era. There was luckily one thing that discerned him from those people. It was the countless exams he had taken in his modern-day life to get a job, and he decided to make use of that. He started high-intensity training based on exercise physiology, followed a balanced diet according to nutritional science, and did practical striking training based on mixed martial arts, and so on. He kept building himself step by step. After a few years, his training began to manifest in the form of a muscular and handsome body that any girl would fall for. He had overwhelming strength, and he could destroy a mountain with his bare hands. However, no one knew if this power was a blessing from God or another trial. That question still hangs over everything. Currently, he has already dealt with all the wild wolves with his tremendous strength, and old man Joseph rescues little Dell, who is still crying her eyes out. Joseph turns to Johann and tries to knock some sense into him, saying what he just did was reckless and way too dangerous. At the same time, he cannot deny it was impressive, because Johann stepped in front of wild beasts without hesitating just to protect a young girl. Joseph is genuinely moved by what looks like an honorable act, and on behalf of the people in the territory, he thanks him for it. But Johann is completely in his own world, and instead of soaking in the praise, he is busy losing his mind over which wolf pelt will sell for the highest price. Joseph hears that and instantly has to take his words back because this guy is clearly not operating on normal hero logic. He then goes over to Dell and asks if she is hurt anywhere, and she responds by thanking him, but right after that her face turns pale. Something even more terrifying has appeared behind them, and the mood flips in 1 second. It is the boss of those wolves, and this thing is way more fierce and horrifying than the smaller ones. Joseph is completely shaken when he sees it, and he tells Johann to run because taking that monster down would need an entire army. Johann, on the other hand, is thrilled and overwhelmed at the same time because he did not even think a monster like this existed in this world. He can feel the killing intent pouring off the wolf boss, but none of that matters to him when all he can think about is how much that pelt is going to sell for. The boss charges straight at Johann and swings at him, but he dodges it cleanly, and while pulling back, he rips up a chunk of rocky ground and throws it at the beast. The boss does not dodge, so it takes a hit near the eye and ends up with a scar, which somehow is what worries Johann most because now he thinks the damaged hide might sell for less. Then the boss lets out a brutal roar that is too much for everyone there, and even Johann, who has been tanking everything so far, drops on the spot. Right before he loses consciousness, he sees a strange vision of two knights fighting each other, and one of them ends up beheading the other in broad daylight. As the wounded knight screams in pain, Johann suddenly opens his eyes while shouting from that same pain and starts wondering what he just saw. On top of that, he notices the monster is gone, and the other two are also safe, though both of them are collapsed and out cold. He still has no clue what happened, but he puts both of them on his shoulders and leaves the wolves behind, even though he really wanted those pelts. That part hurts him more than it should, but right now getting out safely matters more. As he gets close to the village, he sees it is still bright out and they might be looking for Dell, so he starts hoping he might at least earn some points with his father Gessen. He even imagines Gessen being impressed after hearing he took down a whole pack of wolves by himself, and maybe in a miracle timeline, even thinking about making him the heir. Still, Johann knows that fantasy is not happening, and he is not that delusional. At best, if luck finally does him one favor, he might get assigned to the guard, and even that would be enough to stop worrying about survival for a while. The moment he reaches the village, he sees a group of dangerous-looking men led by Philip, and Philip immediately starts yelling at him, asking where he has been all day and how he dares disappear during their father's inspection. Johann had almost forgotten this was inspection day, so while setting the others down, he says there was something unavoidable. At the same time, his father Gessen drops down from his horse, calls him an insolent wench, and cuts him off before he can say anything else. Gessen then demands to know how Johann dares look down on him and says he will crack his arrogant skull open. Johann gets pissed off because the first thing he hears the moment he comes back is more trash from his family. But then he suddenly lights up with an idea and decides to flip this whole mess into an opportunity. He tells his father he got late because he was out saving villagers from danger in the forest. Dell's father rushes out from the crowd the second he sees her and pulls her into his arms. Tears run down his cheeks from pure relief because he has been searching for her all day. Johann then adds that Dell was surrounded by a dozen wolves in the forest, and he fought to save her and barely managed to drive them off. He admits he may have missed the inspection, but he believes he did what any son of a knightly family should do. He bends before his father and asks for forgiveness, promising he will keep doing his best to protect the territory. Then, while he is already selling the pitch, he slips in that giving him the captain of the guard position would be a great idea. Johann is low-key proud of himself for that move because in his head that was a clean self-promotion. He even thinks that if he were the interviewer, he would hire someone who sold himself that smoothly on the spot. Gessen is still drunk and acting goofy, so he does not buy a word of it and demands to know where the wolves are that Johann claims to have defeated. He also throws in whether Johann really expects him to believe all that without any proof. Johann doubles down and brings up that they even faced a massive black wolf out there. This time Gessen drops the goofy act, snaps hard, and shouts at him for daring to lie, warning that he will smash his mouth if he keeps it up. Johann takes that as a duel challenge and accepts it right away because he wants to prove his skill. Normally he does not want to fight, even if it is family, but he knows he does not have much choice here. Gessen lets out a nasty little laugh and agrees to the challenge, adding that he will judge Johann's skill himself. Then he tells him to draw his sword because this is a swordsmanship challenge, and a fistfight does not count. The moment Johann hears sword, he goes pale on the spot. He immediately starts blaming Gessen for never teaching him swordsmanship in the first place. Having no other choice, Johann pulls out his sword, only to realize it is already broken. Gessen then turns to Philip and orders him to lend Johann a sword. As Philip steps closer, he quietly warns Johann to apologize to their father, because that is the only way he survives this. Johann fires back and asks why he should apologize when he has not done anything wrong, and he adds that running away is not what a man does. Then Johann steps forward, thinking this whole situation might actually work in his favor. If he shows his abilities in front of the villagers, even Gessen might be forced to accept him. Johann rushes in with the sword, and for some reason Gessen suddenly feels a monstrous aura coming off him. It is enough to make even him take notice for a second. Johann swings first, but Griesen blocks it easily, and shatters Johann's sword into pieces without even trying. Johann still does not back down, and he starts throwing punches until he forces Griesen down to one knee. Even then, Griesen is built like a monster, and he swings his weapon to behead Johann without hesitating. That move shocks even his own sons, because now they can tell he is genuinely trying to kill him. Gessen then demands to know if Johann understands why he never taught him anything, and he tells him that even if he had learned, he still would have stayed a worm. He keeps ranting that no matter how hard Johann struggles, he will never be a match for him. After that, Gessen declares the territory belongs to him alone, and no one can take it from him. Not Johann, not the Emperor, not anyone. Johann can barely process the nonsense he is spewing, because blood from the head injury starts clouding his vision. While Johann is still trying to stay focused, Philip suddenly shouts his name to warn him about the next attack. Gessen is about to throw his weapon straight at Johann's face, but Johann blocks it just in time. Even so, his legs give out, and he drops lower from the impact and blood loss. Gessen warns him to know his place, and he threatens that if Johann crosses him one more time, he will split his head open for real. After that, Gessen turns and leaves like nothing happened. Meanwhile, Johann is left there barely standing, with the villagers and his brothers now seeing just how insane this family really is. Johann is taken to the church, where Father Valberg starts cursing Gessen and calls him a truly despicable man. Our protagonist warns him what he will do if someone hears that, but Valberg does not care, because he is the father of the papal church. He is fuming while going on about how a knight must uphold his honor, and he cannot believe Gessen treated his own son like that after our guy saved the villagers. Johann is badly beaten up, but he still insists he is fine, and says that as long as he survived, that is all that matters. Even then, Valberg keeps letting out his frustration over Gessen, and does not calm down right away. After a moment, our boy admits he did not know much about swordsmanship, and that finally makes Valberg settle a little. Valberg then explains that Gessen has fought countless battles and inherited his family's swordsmanship, and on top of that, he has real-life experience and the wisdom that comes with age. So it is no surprise Johann could not win against him in a straight fight. He even gives an example and mentions that Lord Brits from the neighboring territory reportedly cut down 300 serfs on his own. Johann gets shocked hearing that and admits he thought he could beat his drunk father since he had fought off a huge black wolf. The second Valberg hears that, he grabs our protagonist by the shoulders in shock and asks if he is sure he saw a black wolf in the forest. Clueless, Johann tells him Joseph and Dell also saw it there, so it was not just him. Valberg looks genuinely terrified and explains that black wolves have been seen as taboo since long ago, and the priests call them the omen of death. According to stories passed down for centuries, black wolves come carrying death and blood. Johann does not really believe in that kind of stuff, but at this point our guy starts thinking the black wolf may have been a premonition of his duel with his father. Valberg then reassures him and says those stories about the dark wolf are old, and maybe God is helping Johann, because he is a great person who puts others above himself. That leaves our boy confused and completely speechless, which honestly makes sense. In his head he has only been worrying about money this whole time, not other people. At the same time, a massacre is happening near the Brits' territory close to the Eitz estate, and the whole scene is pure horror. People are begging for their lives, but they still end up burned alive and stacked up like sacks of rice. And the worst part is they do not spare anyone, not even women and children. Some soldiers admit this is cruel, and they know exactly how ugly it looks, but others do not care at all because they are just doing the job and getting paid in gold. At the entrance, a giant knight named Karamov stands there with a sword in his hand, and a soldier kneels before him, handing over the Brits' family seal ring, and reports that the mercenaries have finished cleaning everything up. After hearing that, Karamov remarks that he had high expectations for Brits, especially since he was said to have taken down 300 soldiers on his own, but in the end, he could not even survive 2 attacks. Then he declares that as the sword of the Holy Empire, the proxy of his imperial majesty, and one of the recollectors of seals, he will punish all corrupt nobles in the emperor's name. He goes on to proclaim that everyone who stands with the emperor will be rewarded with endless gold and honor, which is the kind of line men say right before making a whole country bleed. After that, he orders his army to move on to the Eitz estate next, and spread the same fire and cruelty there too. Then we see 2 knights in full armor sparring with each other, and as they push back and forth, one of them breaks the other knight's head armor and straight up beheads him. Then it turns out the one who gets beheaded is Johann, but it is only a nightmare, and our protagonist wakes up in panic right away. Since facing that huge black wolf, things have been seriously messing with his head, and the dreams have not let up. He even remembers what Valberg said about the black wolf being a bad omen. But then our guy tries to shake it off and tells himself it is just superstition, especially since Valberg also called it an old legend. On top of that, he keeps trying to convince himself he did not even do anything to that wolf. Then he suddenly remembers he actually threw a rock at it, which kind of ruins the argument on the spot. Anyways, our boy gets tired of overthinking and decides to drop it for now, so he runs off to train instead. While he is out there throwing punches, his brothers show up again just to bully him and remind him what their father said, which is that if he does not want to die, he should stop making himself noticeable. They keep running their mouths and acting all high and mighty, and then they clown him by asking if he thinks breaking a log is enough to make him stronger. Johann looks at them like their faces are begging to be used as punching bags, but he holds back the intrusive thoughts and punches the tree instead, smashing it into pieces in one shot. His brothers already look ugly, but now their eyes bulge out even more after seeing that. Johann turns around, still heated, and tells them to come closer and repeat what they just said. That is all it takes for them to fold, and they run off with their tails between their legs. Watching them leave, Johann wonders how people like that survive while thinking so little, and he cannot help feeling they should be worrying about how to make a living instead of wasting time talking trash. As our boy is about to start training again, Philip shows up from behind and points out that everything his brothers said is true, and their father has no intention of giving him any position. Johann already figured out that much, and even then he thinks it could have gone worse since their father did not kill him on the spot. He has pretty much accepted his fate by now, and he knows he will have to find some other way to make a living. Philip then reveals that their father actually fears Johann and sees his strength as a threat, which is why he keeps him at a distance in the first place. According to Philip, their father wants obedient children like him and the others, but our protagonist is different and insists on living by his own principles. He adds that Gessen believes Johann's strength will one day take everything from him, just like Gessen once overthrew their grandfather and took power for himself. Johann just stands there confused, because to him Philip is talking in circles and dropping family drama like it is supposed to make sense. Then Philip orders a servant to bring a bag forward, and inside it is a plain surcoat, a long sword from somewhere in the castle, and a spare chest plate. Philip asks if these are the things Johann has been eyeing for a long time, and our guy flinches because he is dead right. Then Philip keeps going and explains that he is not like their father, and he would never throw away someone capable. He tells our guy that when he becomes lord in the future, he will appoint him captain of the Eitz Guard, and until then, Johann should keep training and stay out of trouble. Our guy points out that he never starts trouble first, but Philip is already walking away and does not bother continuing the conversation. Johann looks at the armor and realizes it looks a lot like the one from his dream, so now he starts wondering if wearing it means he will die the same way he did in that nightmare. Even so, our protagonist feels for some reason that he can overcome it. Whatever the truth is, our guy knows one thing for sure, and that is he needs proper equipment if he wants to win next time. So he puts on the armor, and once it is on, our boy looks way too clean in it and honestly looks cool as hell. At the tavern, a bunch of old men are gathered around one guy who is already turning Johan into a full legend while telling the story. He claims our protagonist took down 50 wolves by himself, and then left all the pelts behind because a true knight would never be obsessed with money. Poor villagers don't know Johan is living on money mantra. He keeps hyping him up and adds that Johan drew his sword only to save Del and Joseph, which proves he is pure, righteous, and basically a role model for everyone. The other men start buying into it too, and soon they are talking about how our boy is more knightly than Gessen, who they describe as nothing but a drunk woman chasing pig, and some of them even say they wish Johan had chopped his head off that day. Meanwhile, a man covered in a robe sits there quietly, listening to all of it without saying a word. Del's father is also completely drunk and passing drinks around to everyone, shouting that the drinks are on him because Johan saved his daughter Del, and the whole tavern starts cheering with him. Then one old man notices the stranger in the robe and asks who he is because nobody has seen him before. The robed man grins wide and shows way too many teeth, which becomes obvious this guy is no normal traveler. He starts talking like a demon from another world, saying it is interesting that the villagers are bad-mouthing their lord in front of a total stranger, which must mean they are not afraid of anything. As a dark aura starts leaking off him, he says he likes their story even more now, and demands they tell him everything they know about Johan. That is the moment the old men realize they are in serious trouble. The mood in the tavern goes from funny gossip to straight panic in 1 second. Johan roams around the village looking like a total cutie patootie, and he is excited out of his mind because he thinks he will be appointed captain of the guards once Philip becomes lord, which to him means his golden road has finally arrived. Our boy is fully locked into that dream, even though we all know a protagonist never gets the easy path. Then his eyes fall on a drunk man, and he figures he cannot just leave him lying in the street if he is going to be the future captain of the guards. So our protagonist walks up to the mysterious man and asks for his address, so he can escort him home. But in the blink of an eye, that man appears behind Johan and points a dagger at him, which leaves our guy completely puzzled about what just happened. Johan wonders who this guy is, and if he is an assassin sent by Gessen, but Gessen would have come by himself to take his life, and would not use an assassin for this job. Philip also cannot pull this act, so our protagonist gets agitated when he realizes he cannot guess who this guy is. He opens his mouth and asks what he wants, and if it is money, he can have everything and let him go. The mysterious man replies that if it is money, he has more than enough, and then he warns Johan that he will ask him a question, and if his answer is not to his liking, he will slit his throat right away. Johan starts panicking, unlike cocky protagonists, but he tries to get himself together by thinking about how he once made it to round 2 in an interview with a major corporation, so he has to answer perfectly and survive. That guy looks at Johan's body and says it is like fine wine, and it is hard to believe he is the son of that pig. Then he asks if Johan is really Gessen's son, and our guy is sweating hard because this man is holding his life in his hands, and this is the first question he asks. Trembling, Johan replies that sometimes a lion can be born from a pig's bloodline. The man does not react to his answer, and that puts our boy into serious thinking, because he starts wondering if it was the wrong answer. Then that guy bursts out laughing because the answer was quite to his liking, but he still does not release Johan, and claims that Johan Eitz is now his. Dues, is that a love confession? This bearded guy is Kagal, the Empire's greatest assassin and the Nessos Guild's poison master. He perfected his swordsmanship through countless assassinations, and later he became known as the Venom Serpent because his movements resembled a serpent. However, even he had a problem, because he could not find a successor to inherit his swordsmanship. He searched everywhere, even through the Assassination Guild, but sadly, all he found were worthless insects who could not succeed him. A few showed potential, but they prioritized their honor as knights and preferred death over becoming assassins. More than 30 heirs of knightly families died at Kagal's hand, all choosing death in the name of honor. Growing impatient in his search for a successor, he visited the Witch of the Empire, and she told him the disciple he seeks resides in the Eitz Castle, which is a small forgotten rural territory, and that disciple is the son of a lecherous drunkard lord. Kamagal did not believe he could find a disciple in a backwater dump that could be bought for half a gold coin, but when the witch told him that if her prophecy displeased him, he could have his money returned, he did not want to risk a curse from taking back a witch coin, so he decided to believe her prophecy. He wanted to believe her because he had already wasted so many years searching for a successor, and he had no time left. Even after stepping into that land, doubt still clung to him. He had already decided that if the brat did not come to his liking, he would take his life on the spot. Currently, Kagal introduces himself as the master of the Nessos Guild and says he will make Johan his successor without wasting time. So he threatens him and tells him to choose, either die by his hands or become his successor. Desperate, Johann asks how much money he would take to teach him swordsmanship, and Kegel bluntly replies that he will not take any money. Hearing this, our guy drops his jaw in shock that a skilled man is willing to teach him swordsmanship for free. With sparkling eyes, Johann says he has been waiting for someone like him and asks what took him so long. Kegel explains that his swordsmanship is the way of an assassin, and simply learning it will brand Johann as disgraceful and the shame of a knightly family. But our protagonist does not care about fame or honor, and he begs him to teach him swordsmanship. Kegel accepts his request and realizes this brat is the first one to accept his offer. Then the money-loving boy shows his true priorities and says Kegel mentioned he has plenty of money, so if Johann learns well, will he give him an allowance? Kegel is left speechless and believes this brat is really something else. At the Eitz castle, Gessen tells his people that he is stepping out for a while, since the inspection is done. In response, both Philip and Madame Eitz say they will take care of the castle. Then they both hit each other with a nasty side eye, and each of them starts arguing that the castle will belong to them in the future. Gessen is already fed up with this daily argument, and just when he is about to move on, Philip raises a concern and points out that Johann still has not returned, then asks what they should do now. Gessen instantly boils over and shouts at him not to waste their time on that brat, because the death of a weakling is no concern of his. Madame Eitz chuckles at the insult, while Philip apologizes and quietly keeps worrying about Johann, wondering where he is and what he is doing right now. At the same time, near the forest by Eitz castle, Kegel takes Johann out to test how skilled he really is. Our boy, being our boy, asks Kegel to lend him a sword because he somehow keeps breaking his own. Kegel hands him the sword, but in his head he is already thinking this brat is reckless and annoying, and he does not like anything about him. He even starts thinking maybe he should just kill him now and be done with it. As they both get into position to spar, Kegel is completely stunned when he sees Johann holding the sword in a stance that looks more like a kid about to play than someone from a knightly family. He seriously starts wondering if our protagonist is even telling the truth about where he comes from. Johann then asks if he has to use the sword or if he can fight however he wants. Kegel tells him to do anything he wants. Use fists, throw rocks, whatever. And that is basically a jackpot line for our guy. Johann smirks, then throws a powerful punch straight at Kegel's sword and breaks it into pieces, which leaves Kegel completely stunned. In that moment, Kegel realizes all his doubts were pointless, and he finally acknowledges that Johann is the real deal. Kegel worries that if he takes Johann's hit, his bones and muscles will get crushed. He feels like he is not facing a human at all, but a lion. However, Kegel is not exactly normal either, and he moves with serpent-like motion as he slips around our protagonist and lands a hard strike that throws him to the ground. Kegel notices he hit Johann with the flat side of the blade, but our guy still does not pass out, which is honestly ridiculous. He remarks that if Johann had been born 1,000 years earlier, he would have been called a legendary hero. Our boy blushes and thanks his master for the compliment, like he did not just get launched. But then Kegel reveals that Johann has a critical weakness, and no matter what, that weakness will get him killed. The words hit our protagonist so hard it feels like he got electrocuted. Johann asks what he means, and Kegel explains that he cannot control his own strength, and that same strength will end up taking his life. Our guy gets back up and refuses to believe it, so Kegel challenges him to attack again, and promises that if Johann breaks Kegel's sword instead of his own, he will give him gold. The second he hears gold, Johann's eyes start sparkling like treasure just dropped from the sky. He rushes forward with his sword and charges in, but Kegel blocks the attack easily and pushes him back, and before long Johann's sword breaks into pieces again. Sharp fragments fly everywhere, and some of them scratch his face. Johann gets worried because it feels like the same thing that happened when he fought his father. Kegel points out that Johann just lost to his own strength, and if he does not learn to control that power, he will die. Our protagonist pulls the sword fragment out of his chest plate and asks if Kegel threw that piece at him on purpose. Kegel replies that if someone is proficient with the sword, doing that is a piece of cake. Johann makes a face like he just got dragged into JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and he realizes he really has to learn to control his strength if he wants to avoid dying. At the same time, our guy is still locked in on becoming the future captain of the Eights Guard, because he is absolutely obsessed with that title. Then Kegel gives him a demo and throws his sheathed sword at Johann's armor. Our boy is shocked when he sees the armor get sliced just from the sheath. Kegel explains that if Johann learns to control his strength, he will be able to do things like that too, and he could cut through anything even without holding a blade. Johann makes a wild face because he can already imagine how broken he would be with that kind of power. Enough talking, he wants to start training right away. Kegel warns him that he might even die during training, but Johann is more than ready for it. The next morning, our guy returns to the village with a swollen face because he spent the night learning how to hold back, and he finally manages not to break his sword anymore. Even then, Johann keeps wondering when he is actually going to start learning real swordsmanship. As he reaches the Eitz castle, he notices a group of men gathered at the main gate. He asks what they are doing there, but one of them answers rudely and tells him the area is restricted and he should leave at once. Johann gets pissed and asks who he is to tell him what to do. Then the man introduces himself and explains they are mercenaries directly affiliated with His Imperial Majesty, and their group is called the Wolves of ActionToon. The moment our protagonist hears mercenaries, he lights up because he has wanted a job like that, and right away he asks how the pay is. The other men start mocking him and ask if he is planning to join them. Then they brag that what they earn is not even comparable to a guard captain's pay. They tell him they get 2 gold coins for a single job. They also look him over and note that he seems like he works out a bit, which only makes him a bigger target. And in the end they say skill is what really matters. Johan is basically floating after hearing the words 2 gold coins, because he has never even seen that kind of money in his life. His greed starts taking over on the spot, and our boy seriously begins wondering if he should switch career paths. Honestly, that is a very normal reaction in times like these when a golden opportunity lands right in front of you. While they are still talking, a noble-looking man rides past on a horse, and the second Johan senses his killing intent, he instinctively tries to unsheath his sword. Before he can even pull it out, all the mercenaries point their swords at him, and now even our guy is sweating because he does not understand why he tried to draw his blade in the first place. One of them demands to know how he dares draw a sword in front of Sir Karamov. Then Karamov stops them and asks Johan who he is, and in the middle of all that pressure, our protagonist answers that he is Johan of House Eitz. After hearing that, Karamov takes off his helmet and reveals himself. And yeah, his face card is crazy. He is a guard knight of the Holy Empire Emperor, and once Johan bends before him, he is sweating even harder because he realizes he never felt killing intent. This intense, not from the Black Wolf, and not even from fighting his father. This pressure is so heavy that it feels like he is prey standing in front of an apex predator. Karamov does not make a big scene though, and he simply tells Johan to move because he is in the way. The other men snap Johan out of the moment, and then they move on to follow Karamov. Karamov has a knight in training named Jane with him, and she asks if it is really fine to leave Johan like that. But Karamov answers that he does not want to cause a scene on a good day. As they walk off, Johan stays behind and keeps staring, and wondering why a knight of the Emperor would come all the way out here to a place like this. That kind of visit never means anything normal. When Philip hears that the Honorable Karamov has stepped into their territory, he rushes outside and starts wondering why someone that important would come all the way to a place like this. Panting, he reaches him and introduces himself as the next lord of the Eitz family. But then he sees Madame Eitz is already there trying to flirt with Karamov. She introduces her young son John to Karamov as the next lord of the family, and in the same breath she starts talking nonsense about how if she had known someone as handsome as Karamov existed, she would have married later. Karamov does not pay attention to any of her blabbering, and he just walks in, takes the throne seat, and asks where Gessen is. Philip gets offended and starts lecturing him, saying he may have a great reputation, but addressing Lord Gessen like that is improper. Madame Eitz instantly argues back and keeps talking, saying Karamov is the Empire's greatest knight, and there is nothing wrong with him calling Gessen whatever he wants. Then she adds that, as the rightful lady of the house, she will handle Karamov's reception herself. Philip immediately realizes what she is doing, and he can tell she is trying to use this moment to push John as the next lord. Karamov has enough of both of them, so he slams his sword down and gives them a menacing glare that kills the whole room. Then he orders them to shut up, get lost, and bring him alcohol because he will wait in the castle until Gessen arrives. Out there, Johan is training with Kagal, but in the middle of the fight he starts thinking about how powerful Karamov was. The moment our guy loses focus, Kagal takes over and throws several kunai at him, and while Johan tries to dodge, one of them still slices across his neck. Kagal warns him that if those kunai had been coated with poison, our protagonist would already be dead. Then he asks why Johan is losing focus during practice. Johan explains that knights claiming to be the Emperor's personal guard came to the village, and the whole thing feels off to him. This is Eitz family territory, and no matter who they are, even Imperial knights should not be shutting the gates and controlling entry like that, which does not make sense. Kagal asks what Johan can even do about it, whether it is suspicious or not, because Karamov is the Emperor's direct knight and the strongest warrior on the continent, and he is one of the core powers of the Holy Empire. He even adds that the armor Karamov wears is legendary. Johan then asks if Karamov is stronger than him, and Kagal pauses for a moment before answering that if he ever had to face Karamov, he would turn around and run without hesitation. Johan blurts out that you only know the result of a fight after fighting it, but Kagal smacks him over the head with his sword and yells at him to know his place. He reminds our boy that he cannot even control his own strength yet, and right now he is just a half-witted brat who does not even know the basics of swordsmanship. That shuts him up for a second, but it also lights a fire under him. Johan gets serious again and agrees to keep training. The gaggle keeps attacking him, and Johan keeps taking the hits again and again while trying to figure out what he is missing. He cannot understand why he still cannot make a proper cut, even though Kagagle is not even using a real sword and is fighting him with just a scabbard. Then our protagonist realizes the key is the flow of strength, and that changes everything in his head. He understands he cannot just swing blindly, and instead he has to transfer the flow of power and focus it into the tip of the sword. Once that clicks, our guy slowly starts to understand what controlling his strength really means. Kagagle notices it too, because the dull sound of Johan's blade starts turning sharp. Before long, Johan is finally sparring with Kagagle on equal terms, and then he cuts Kagagle's sword clean into 2 pieces. Our boy jumps in excitement because he finally gets the feeling, and to him it did not even seem that hard. Kagagle refuses to give him that win and says it was just luck. Then he challenges Johan to come again and warns him that this time he will not hold back. But when they clash again, Johan swings skillfully with a slithering motion and does not give Kagagle a chance. While our guy is celebrating again, Kagagle opens his eyes in shock and starts wondering what this brat even is. He only taught him how to control strength, but somehow Johan is already using the secret sword technique, serpent tongue, like it belongs to him. Johan only saw Kagagle use that move for a brief moment, but he already copied it and even polished it beyond Kagale's own version. At that point, unless a miracle happens, Kagale's assassin instincts tell him our protagonist has already become someone he cannot defeat. Then Johan goes and ruins the aura by making a weird, excited face, while Kagagle just mutters to himself that this brat is absurd. Kagagle tells Johan that his teaching ends here, and he will leave at sunrise. Johan gets confused and points out that he just got the hang of the sword, and now Kagagle is suddenly talking about leaving. Kagagle admits that our protagonist has already become stronger than him, and he is satisfied as long as his swordsmanship does not disappear and keeps living on. He adds that Johan has worked hard until now, so our guy can finally go live his life however he wants. They sit across the fire, and Johan asks if Kagagle knows anything about ominous signs like a black wolf. He explains that he saw one recently, and after that he had a dream where his head was cut off, so when Kagagle came for his head, he thought Kagagle was the omen. Kagagle replies that if he had killed him, then yeah, that would have been an ominous sign. Before leaving, he gives our boy one last piece of advice, and tells him to find a weapon that suits his strength. He explains that Johan would need at least Dana's steel if he wants a weapon that can withstand his power. Baka Johan has no clue what Dana's steel even is, so Kagagle explains that it is a metal imbued with magic, and it exists only as a legendary relic because the method to create it was lost long ago. He adds that it can now only be mined from ancient ruins, and that is why weapons made from Danas are extremely rare, with only a few in the world. The moment Johan hears how rare it is, he loses hope instantly because he already knows that means expensive. Kagagle agrees and tells him he would not be able to afford it even if he saved money his whole life. Johan asks why he even recommended it then, and Kagagle answers that he only wanted him to find a weapon that actually fits his situation. Kagagle adds one more warning that even the color of that armor is unusual for Dana's steel, and if our guy ever sees someone wearing it, he should run far away immediately. As soon as Kagagle gets up to leave, he tells Johan to carve his words into his bones, and the rule is simple: do not fight opponents you cannot beat, run if it is dangerous, and if you must fight, use any means necessary, and kill without fail. He will not die as long as he follows that rule. And after saying that, Kagagle finally leaves for his next journey. Johan holds on to his master's words tightly, because this is the kind of advice that can decide whether he lives or dies. Back at the castle, Madame Ait serves alcohol to Karamov, and asks if it is to his liking. Karamov throws it away and says it tastes like trash, but she does not move and keeps pushing, claiming it was expensive and the only better alcohol is in Gessen's room. Then she leans in harder and tells him he must be tired from the journey, so she invites him to a cozy bedroom and hints that the two of them could have a wonderful time together. She is clearly trying to pull him in, but Karamov has zero interest and orders her to get lost. Madame Aitz gets annoyed and snaps back that they do not have much time, and she insists he should let her begin his reception since Gessen will not arrive until late tonight. The moment Karamov hears that, he gets up from his chair and decides he will enjoy himself, but not in the way she expects, because he chooses to enjoy himself by slaughtering her. Outside the room, Philip cannot believe what is happening in there. At the same time, Johan returns to the village and walks into a nightmare, because the whole village is on fire. Gessen and his men also notice fire and smoke rising from the Aitz estate, and even he gets rattled when he sees it. He quickly rushes back toward the estate, trying to figure out what happened before things get even worse. When he finally arrives at the main gate, the guards outside mock him and call him slow and dull like a pig, then tell him to hurry because Karamov is not a patient man. The moment Gessen steps through the gate, he stumbles after seeing dead bodies all over the ground, and the sight shocks him to the core. Right then, Karamov steps forward and tells him he is late. Gesson loses it and charges with his weapon, demanding to know what Caravan is doing there. Caravan answers that Gesson is guilty of attempting to assassinate the emperor and of high treason, and by his majesty's decree, House Eitz will be wiped out. Gesson fires back and calls them false charges, saying Caravan is just pinning them on him so he can execute him, and he refuses to let him do whatever he wants. While blocking Gesson's attack, Caravan orders his men to blow the horn, take the Eitz family seal, and purge everyone in the territory from the map. One soldier blows the horn, and right after that, the army starts raiding innocent people across the territory. At the same time, one knight has Valberg tied up and demands to know where the pig's bastard son is. Valberg does not know anything about our protagonist, so when the knight is about to behead him, Johann appears from behind and attacks him. Then our guy frees Valberg from the ropes and asks what is even going on. Valberg is just as confused, and he tells Johann the imperial troops are killing villagers on sight, and it is possible Gesson has already been killed. Johann gets worried and decides to head to the castle, but then he hears a sound coming from the fire. He moves toward it and finds Dell crying, and when he looks further, he sees Dell's father hanging on a stake and burning in the flames. Happy memories of Dell's father flash through our guy's mind, and then he looks around and realizes other people close to him have also been burned to death. Johann gets shaken up and takes Dell to Valberg, telling him it is too dangerous to stay there anymore. After leaving her with Valberg, our protagonist heads toward the castle even though Valberg tries to stop him. Johann keeps going anyway because at this point he cannot just stand back. When he gets there, he sees Gesson's head hanging on a pole with a board attached to it, and the board states that Gesson was executed for treason against the emperor, and anyone who retrieves his corpse without permission will face the same fate. Even though Gesson was rotten to the core, he was still Johann's father, and seeing his head like that drives our boy into a rage. He cuts down the pole and stomps on the emperor's flag. One soldier recognizes him as the bastard son, and they all rush him at once to kill him. But our guy is not the same weakling anymore, and he wipes out the incoming soldiers one after another while pushing forward toward the castle. As he keeps moving, Johann starts wondering why he is even going there because Valberg was right and he should be running if he wants to live, or else Karemev will kill him. Then he hears someone call his name, and it turns out to be Philip. The same Philip who dreamed of becoming the next lord now stands there with everything destroyed by Karemev. Philip takes off his head armor and tells Johann to run away because if he stays here he will die. Then he gives him the helmet, and with his voice fading, says he wanted to give it to him for the day. Johann became the next lord. After that, Philip loses strength and dies right there. Our protagonist is stuck in a brutal spot because he wants revenge on Karamov, but Kaigal's words keep echoing in his head, telling him to run from danger, and if he has to fight, then he must kill. Johann chooses the second path, and he puts on the head armor before heading into the castle. Our guy moves inside, and the knights there get confused and start wondering what the guards outside are doing. Johann does not waste time explaining anything, and he just swings his arm and wipes them out, then demands that Karamov show himself right now. Then the worst possible person appears in full Danis armor, and Karamov recognizes him as the bastard son of the Eitz family, the same man he met before, Johann Eitz. Our boy drops the formal intro and says he would rather be called a pissed-off man. Karamov tells him he should have run away if he wanted to live, but it looks like he does not care about his life. Then Karamov challenges him to come forward, and our Johann is already planning the same thing. Johann is basically recreating the scene from his dreams, and now it is happening for real in front of him. The two of them clash in a fierce fight, and for a moment our guy even seems to gain the upper hand and cracks Karamov's sword. But Karamov is on a whole different level, and he pushes Johann back without much trouble. Even then, our protagonist pulls himself together and charges again. Karamov starts finding the fight interesting, and he keeps pressing him until he breaks Johann's sword apart. At one point, Karamov throws an attack that Johann barely dodges, but the strike still slices a tower into two pieces. Dust fills the whole area and blinds him for a moment. Then a soldier's corpse gets thrown at Johann, and he cuts through that too. Karamov gets even more amused and realizes this bastard is much stronger than Brits ever was. Then our boy gets back on his feet and rushes in again with an attack that actually cuts through Karamov's armor at the arm. That hit leaves Karamov amazed, because humans are not supposed to damage Danis armor, and now he starts wondering who Johann really is. As our protagonist attacks again, Karamov notices Johann has terrifying raw power, but he only knows how to swing his sword without finesse. Karamov tests that thought with a simple thrust, and our guy cannot dodge it. That is when he confirms it, and realizes Gesson really did not teach him swordsmanship, because Johann is fighting almost completely on instinct without a single proper technique. However, Karamov now believes Johann is the real danger, and he decides he has to finish him before our guy lands another wild slash. As he charges in with a heavy blow, Johann uses the serpent tongue movement and cuts into Karamov's abdomen. Then our protagonist follows it with a brutal punch to the gut that makes Karamov vomit blood. Karamov can barely stay on his feet, and he realizes Johann just used Kigal's technique, which means he seriously underestimated Johann Eitz. Johann walks up to him and takes off his helmet, then asks why he carried out all this massacre. Karamov coughs and spits blood, but he still answers and says it was all by his Imperial Majesty's will. He explains that the Holy Empire is more unstable than ever, so His Majesty unsheathed the Imperial sword to set the Empire right. Then he reveals that this Imperial sword is known as Makarov. As he says that, he starts laughing and admits he has crossed blades with countless knights, but he has never met anyone as strong as Johann, and that honestly moves him. Then he invites our guy to come to the Empire, saying His Majesty needs a talent like him, and in return the Empire's endless gold will bring him glory. He keeps listing rewards and says Johann would receive vast fertile lands, and His Majesty would even appoint him as an Imperial Knight. Even though that is exactly the kind of future our boy always dreamed about, Johann does not get swayed and refuses the offer. He tells Karamov that he not only killed his family, but also innocent serfs who did nothing wrong. That line lands heavier than any sword strike, because now this is no longer about money or status for Johann. Karamov is completely shocked and asks if Johann is really rejecting an offer like that just because of serfs. Then he grits his teeth, loses his composure, and starts shouting, asking who cares about dead serfs, and even throws in whether Johann's mother was one of them. He keeps ranting that they are just weak insects and vermin, and that this world runs on one law, where the strong drink the blood of the weak. Hearing that, Johann snaps too, and our protagonist starts throwing punch after punch at Karamov like a maniac, while demanding to know what makes him think he is so great that he gets to decide who deserves to live and who does not. After letting all that rage out, our guy finally stops and turns around to leave. Karamov still has a few breaths left, and he warns Johann that he should have taken the offer, because now it is too late. He tells him that the man who broke the Emperor's sword will know nothing but suffering from this point on. And with that, Karamov finally dies. But even then, Johann is not shaken by the warning, because his mind is already somewhere else. This world treats death like it is normal, and until now our boy mostly thought about money just to survive in it. But they slaughtered everyone in his territory. His family and neighbors were butchered and burned, and that changes something deep inside him. Now even if the whole world becomes his enemy, he believes he only did what had to be done, and he will never regret that choice. This is the way our protagonist decides to live from now on. From here on, Johann is going to face countless enemies from the Empire, and that is where things really start getting crazy. The only question now is whether he will learn new skills, or just keep turning himself into an even bigger monster with pure strength. At the entrance, an injured elf tells Jane what happened, and says Johann Eitz barged into the territory, beat the soldiers badly, and then took Karamov's head with his bare hands. Jane asks if that story is true, then Karamov's body should be there too. So how does he expect her to believe such nonsense without proof? That is the same part the elf does not understand either. Then another man arrives and informs her that the pursuit team is ready, so she gives the order that the target is Johann Eitz, a filthy traitor to his own bloodline, and the one suspected of murdering Sir Karamov. She tells them to chase him down and kill him if they must, but they have to bring him in no matter what. She also warns them that he is believed to tear through Dana's steel with strength alone, so they must never face him alone, and should think of it like hunting a dragon. Then she orders them to seal every road around the territory. They must bring that bastard's head to the Empire. The pursuit team actually tracks down our guy, and it turns out he is carrying Karamov over his shoulders while running with his life on the line. The moment one of them tries to strike him, Johann cuts him into pieces without any effort. He remembers what Philip told him before dying, which was to go to a stable about 500 northwest of the hunting grounds, take a warhorse and flee. Right now our guy only has one goal, and that is to survive no matter what. At least he manages to find the stable, and once he gets there, he puts down Karamov's corpse. Johann brought the body with him because he thought it might confuse the army, but they moved faster than he expected. Even so, he figures Karamov's armor can still work as a shield, so he decides to keep carrying him until he fully shakes them off. Our boy is in terrible shape, and several arrows are stuck in his back by this point. With his body completely exhausted, he enters the stable and sees a strong horse standing inside. He lets out a relieved breath because now he can finally rest a little while riding, and then he gives the horse a new name, Philip. That name hits because Philip really was a good guy in the end. Then some soldiers reach the area around the stable, and one of them spots a strange glint, and realizes it must be the shine of Dana's steel. He orders everyone to search every corner of the area, but suddenly Johann appears on horseback and rushes out. They fire arrows at him, but the shots bounce off after hitting Karamov's armor, which is still protecting him like a shield. So our protagonist rides through the whole night, and he eventually loses the pursuit team as he reaches deep into the dark forest. Once he gets far enough, he buries Karamov's body in the mud, because even after everything, leaving a corpse unburied does not feel right to him. He looks at Karamov's armor and can tell it is expensive, and Karamov's sword is made of Dana's steel, light but still solid. When our guy unsheathes it, he sees words carved on the blade that read, "I am the one who recovers the crests," and that line creeps him out because it sounds like it is talking about taking family crests. Johann decides to keep the sword and bury the armor with trembling hands because carrying that armor around will only bring trouble, but he promises himself he will come back for it later. He already knows that once word spreads that Karamov is dead, the whole empire will come after him, and countless knights will be hunting him down. On top of that, he ran from the estate so fast that he did not even bring a single coin. Even so, our protagonist decides to rest first and think later, because his body is already at the edge, but his life never lets him breathe for long. And this moment is no different. The Black Wolf appears behind him with heavy killing intent, and Johann quickly takes a fighting stance. But the pressure is insane because he is too weak to even control his strength properly right now. He knows he has to get to the horse and flee somehow. Then things get even worse, because the pursuit team also finds the war horse and figures he must be nearby. They hear movement from his side and rush in to catch him this time. Johann is trapped in a nightmare, with the Black Wolf on one side and the pursuit team on the other, and it really looks like this is the end. Then out of nowhere, the Black Wolf charges the pursuit team and tears through them one by one. Johann is stunned, but this is not the time to think, so he forces strength into his legs, gets onto the horse somehow, and rides off. While he escapes, memories from his childhood flash through his head, including the time he spent with Valberg and even his brothers. Then at last, our boy quietly says goodbye to the Eitz family, and behind him the Black Wolf just stands there watching him leave. On the way, Johann finds a checkpoint set up in a weird spot, and the road is completely blocked by those elves. He is basically screwed, and ever since he escaped, he has not eaten, slept, or done anything properly. He never expected the wolves of Akaton to chase him for 3 straight days, and by now he has lost count of how many times he almost died while fighting off those bastards swarming him in packs. Our guy is at his limit, and he does not even have the strength left to lift his sword. He starts wondering if there is really no way out, and if he is finally about to get caught by those bastards and executed. Then he turns and sees a trade wagon with armed escorts, basically a peddler caravan, and our protagonist quickly comes up with an idea. He decides to disguise himself as a peddler, hoping that might help him avoid suspicion. At the front of the wagon is Eldons from the Katana Trading Company. An escort with an eye patch notices a heavily armed cavalryman standing ahead and warns Eldons right away. He is Kan from the Goran mercenaries, and he thinks they should get ready for a fight. A man named Gamson brushes it off and asks why they should make a big deal out of one guy. He argues that if it comes down to it, the 9 of them can rush him and finish it fast. Then another man named Goran tells Gamson to look properly, because that man is fully armored and riding a warhorse. On top of that, he is wearing a plate helmet and a breastplate, and the hilt of his sword has a purplish sheen, which means it is definitely forged from Danish steel. Goran warns that if that man swings his sword at them, their armor will get cut like butter. He makes it clear they could all get wiped out if they clash head-on, but Gamson is still being a dumbass, and does not understand how serious this is. He keeps insisting there are 9 of them, so there is no way they get wiped out. The other guys get mad and start pushing Gamson back for not reading the situation, and they shut him up fast. Eldons panics and tells Goran and Kan to get ready the second that guy makes any suspicious move, but he still decides to go check the situation himself first, and once he gives the signal, they should all attack at once. As Eldons gets down from the wagon and walks forward, Kan quickly shares a plan with the others and tells them that once the fight starts, they need to knock that guy off his horse first, then calmly aim for the gaps in his armor. It is a solid plan, but they all know it only works if they survive the first swing. Eldons walks up to our protagonist and introduces himself, then politely says he wants to avoid any unnecessary misunderstanding, so he asks if it is all right to know his name. Johann notices right away that Eldons is catfolk, and he also sees the escorts standing tense with their guards up, ready to jump him at any second. He figures they are on edge because of how he looks, so our guy decides to lower their guard before this turns ugly. Johann lifts his helmet and tells him his name, then explains he looks like this because bandits attacked him while he was traveling earlier. That's why they do not need to be too wary, and he also asks him to tell his men to stop staring like they are about to attack him. Eldons gives a fake little laugh, apologizes for the rudeness, and tells him that as a peddler he always has to prepare for the worst case. Johann gets that, and then asks if he can travel with their group, because he lost all his travel money in the attack. He adds that if Eldons can spare a little food and a place to sleep, he will help guard the caravan. Eldons thinks it over and admits to himself that Johann does look strong, and for now he does not seem suspicious either. He decides to accept the offer and tells our guy that they are heading to Marcel, and since it is a fairly long trip, he should go get acquainted with the mercenaries in the back. Johann thanks him, but he has no clue where Marcel even is, because our boy has basically lived in a cage his whole life. Eldons goes back to the others, and Goran asks what is going on. Eldons tells them Johann is just a wanderer, and they will be traveling together for a while, but they still need to keep an eye on him, and if anything happens, they should not hesitate to kill him. The others agree right away. For now, this is exactly what our protagonist needs, if he wants to get through the checkpoint safely. When they reach the checkpoint, an elf from the Wolves of Akaton introduces himself and tells them that if they want to pass, they need to cooperate quietly and allow a brief inspection. Eldons introduces himself as Eldons from the Katana Trading Company, and says he has done business with them before, so he asks to speak directly with the one in charge. The elf gets surprised because Katana Trading has its main office in Marcel, which is a major commercial hub, and the kind of place even the Emperor cannot touch carelessly. His whole attitude shifts, and he greets Eldons properly, then explains they are only following orders while searching for a runaway traitor, so he asks Eldons to cooperate with them. Johan gets worried because now it is obvious they really set up this checkpoint to find him. One of the men points at him and orders him to take off his helmet and show his face. Our guy coughs and lies that he has a bit of a condition on his face, but they burst out laughing, mock him, and ask if he is hiding something. Johan gets cornered again and starts thinking that if it comes to this, he might have no choice but to fight. But before anything pops off, Eldon steps in and shuts them down. He warns them and asks if they are suspecting his company, and reminds them he already asked for their commanding officer. Then he adds that if they keep interfering, he will file a complaint to their captain at the Marcel branch himself. That line puts them in a bad spot, and with no better option, the elves clear the path and let them pass. That is how our protagonist finally makes it out of that hell. Later they stop for the night and camp outside. Eldons tells everyone to check their gear and assigns night watch to the oldest and newest recruits, and since Johan has nothing to do, Eldons tells him he can go sleep. After thanking Goran for giving him a futon, our boy lies down with his eyes wide open and mutters to himself that he never thought getting sleep would feel this hard. But his fate stays messy as always, because someone is watching him from the trees. That person then gives an order to his men, and says they will strike from the hill, and hit all of them at once. In the training grounds, a military officer announces that Sergeant Johan successfully carried out defense in depth and held off a large company-sized enemy force with only a small number of troops. For showing outstanding tactical sense and becoming an example to other service members, he is awarded a commendation and 4 nights and 5 days of leave. Johan looks cool as hell in military gear, and he gets hyped thinking the military really suits him. But then reality hits. Because the culture is outdated, the duty shifts are straight up murderous. And worst of all, the paycheck is tiny. After that brutal reality check, he tries to leave the military, but his commander refuses to let him go. At this point, whether it is a dream or real life, trouble really stays glued to our guy. After a while, he opens his eyes and sits up, realizing it was just a dream, and he still could not get proper sleep because of it. Then he looks up and sees an arrow flying at him, and he catches it with his hand before it can take out his eye. Johan gets tense and starts wondering if those bastards tracked him all the way here. He immediately starts shouting that it is an enemy ambush so he can warn the other mercenaries. 5 minutes earlier, we see Can and Gamson on night watch before the alert goes out. Gamson complains about why they are the ones doing watch while that cavalry guy is not. Can shuts him down and asks if he really wants to trust guard duty to someone they just met. He reminds him that the same strange guy could slit their throats, steal their supplies, and run while they are asleep. Can tells him if he cannot understand what really matters, and keeps acting reckless, he will not last long in this job. Gamson gets mad and snaps that he became a mercenary because he did not want to rot in some backwater village his whole life, and wanted to live like a real man. Then he keeps going and says if he knew these mercenaries were a bunch of idiots who freeze up over one armed cavalryman, he never would have joined this trash party in the first place. That pisses Khan off, and he is ready to throw hands right there. Suddenly they hear Johan warning everyone about an attack. At the same time, arrows start flying toward them, so Khan quickly pulls Gamson down and covers them with a shield. Gamson folds instantly like a scared dog and runs off crying with snot all over his face. Right then Goran arrives, sees the ambush, and asks where Gamson is. Khan brushes that off and says they can talk about Gamson later, then asks how Eldons is doing. Goran tells him Eldons is hiding under the wagon. Then they move toward the wagon, where Johan starts calling out a plan and says they should form a circular defense around it, and since they do not know where the attack is coming from, they need to stay together and fight. Khan cuts him off immediately, and asks if he thinks he is the employer there. He tells our guy they will handle their side, so Johan should worry about himself. Our protagonist is left standing there stunned for a second. Then they start handing out shields among themselves, and Johan asks for one too, because he says he has fought in a battle like this before. Eldon shuts him down on the spot and says they do not even have enough shields for their own men, so he needs to figure out how to survive on his own. Our guy is in a desperate spot and realizes these people do not trust him at all. Then a group of attackers finally shows up and rushes in, and Johan quickly notices they are not the wolves of Akaton, and not imperial troops either, but just a random bandit group. Kane immediately orders his men to charge all at once, and the fight starts right away. At first, the mercenaries seem to have the upper hand, but the bandits start pushing them back because they have more numbers. Goran tells his men to hold their ground and not give them space, but one bandit lands a punch on his face and knocks him down, then moves in to finish him with a sword. That is when our protagonist is forced to step in, and he swings his new sword and cuts the attacker down clean. But right after that, something weird happens. The sword starts sucking blood, and Johan has no clue what is going on. One of the bandits notices the rune letters on the blade and realizes the sword is absorbing blood, then yells that it is a demonic sword. That one shout kills the bandits' confidence, and they start hesitating. Johan sees the opening and steps into full fake noble mode, announcing that he is Johan Yates of House Yates and demanding to know who they think they are for attacking him. Our boy is really winging it here, and changing the family name by one letter is crazy work. Still, everyone gets shocked hearing he is a noble, even if none of them recognizes that house. Once they see the demonic sword too, they start believing they are in real trouble. Then Johann points the sword at them and gives them two choices: surrender now or die by that blade. In the end, the bandits drop their weapons and surrender out of fear. Our protagonist then calls out to Goran and tells him to tie them up, and he adds that if any of them resist, kill them. That is a wild way to grab control, but our guy really takes over the whole scene. Goran quietly asks Eldons what they should do about the noble guy. He thought Johann was just a wanderer with a good weapon, but now he turns out to be a noble, and Goran starts worrying he might hold a grudge over how they treated him earlier. Eldons tells him not to panic and says they still let Johann join the group when he asked, so that should count as goodwill, and he can smooth things over. Then he walks up to our guy and nervously says Johann must have had a rough night, but he still helped protect the caravan. He adds that he does not even know how to repay him, while internally he is still dying from the fact that he did not give him a shield. But our protagonist stays chill and says repayment is not what matters, and he is just glad Eldons is safe. That makes Eldons feel way better because he thinks Johann is not going to ask for compensation. Then our boy immediately asks him to lend him a shield next time, and also says he wants to interrogate the bandits with help from the mercenaries. Eldons quickly agrees and promises Johann will get the shield first next time, before anyone else. After that, they bring in the bandit leader and ask who he is and why they attacked them. The leader gives up the story and says they are private soldiers from House Brits, which was recently wiped out. He explains that a few months ago House Brits was suddenly attacked after being accused of treason against the Emperor. According to him, the attackers slaughtered everyone without real proof, and the ones who did it were the wolves of Akiton. They tried to resist, but once the noble executioner joined the fight, they were crushed and forced to retreat. Hearing that, everyone figures the executioner they are talking about can only be one man, Karamov. The soldier bends before them and apologizes, admitting he committed a crime worthy of death, and he says he did not know a noble was traveling with the trading company. He explains that the Imperial army chased them as rebels, and the Northerners turned their backs on them and called them cowardly deserters. He also says he is not trying to justify robbery, but they had no other choice. Johann asks if they attacked for any other reason, and the man bluntly says no. They targeted the trading company only because it looked expensive. Eldons gets mad, shouting that the trade survives on trust, and asks if he even understands how much damage men like him cause to trading companies. At the same time, the others try to hold Eldons back before he goes too far. Johann thinks over everything the man said and remembers that Karamov also claimed it was all for the Emperor. That is when our protagonist starts seeing the bigger picture. He realizes there was probably never any real treason at all, and the Emperor just needed an excuse to purge nobles and let Karamov loose. Johann also sees that these soldiers are victims of power the same way he is, even though it is also true they still chose robbery. Karamov walks up and asks what they should do with them, and if Johann gives the order, they can beat the rest out of them until they talk more. But our guy says they already gave enough information. Then Gamson suddenly rushes in with his weapon, trying to beat them to death. But Kan blocks him and reminds him that they surrendered to Johann, so the mercenaries have no right to punish them. He also throws in the obvious truth that Gamson especially has no right after abandoning his comrades and running away. Gamson makes a nasty face, then pulls his weapon back and acts like he agrees. He still does not look sorry at all. The other bandits also kneel down and start crying their hearts out, begging to be spared, and promising they will never do this again. Kuhn is ready to end them on the spot, but Johann orders everyone to disarm those soldiers and let them go. Then our guy gives them a hard talk and tells them they have probably done nothing their whole lives except swing swords. But even then, robbing caravans is still not something they can justify. He adds that he also learned skills just to survive, and that is exactly why they need to learn how to live without becoming thieves. He tells them to look at the mercenaries. Those men are not avoiding banditry because they do not know how to steal. They avoid it because they chose not to live like that. That is why Johann is letting them walk, so they can learn some real skills and find an actual way to make a living. In return, those soldiers bow to him and thank him with tears in their eyes. Johann then tells his group to get moving because he does not want to stay there any longer and get dragged into more mess. And everyone agrees. Right when they leave, the plot gets spicy because the Black Wolf appears at the edge of a hill and watches our guy from above. It just stands there quietly, staring like it knows way more than it should. Before heading to Marcel, Johann's group decides to stop at a small place called Rutsbeck village and rest for a while. By the time they arrive, our boy looks completely drained, like dried seaweed from hunger after all that chaos, like once Luffy got dried without eating Sanji's food at the whole Cake Island. Anyways, the village chief is a bald old man, and when he hears the Katana Company has arrived, he comes out to meet Eldons. The two greet each other like old friends who go way back. Eldon starts telling him they ran into bandits on the road, and ever since the Emperor started acting crazy, it feels like the bandit problem keeps getting worse. The chief quickly warns him that if someone from the Imperial side heard that, he would be in trouble for talking like that. Eldons laughs it off and says they still made it safely thanks to the noble who joined them, and that guy was insanely strong. Then the chief says that speaking of nobles, one passed through there a few days ago, but he turned out to be a fake, so the chief beat him half to death and threw him out of the village. Eldons laughs and tells him he still gets reckless whenever he loses his temper. Then he reassures him that this noble is different, brave, upright, and not all talk. He even protected the caravan from bandits and did not ask for any reward. The chief has a hard time believing it, but he also knows Eldons is not the type to lie for no reason. So he starts thinking that if a knight like that stayed around, it could really help their village, especially with bandits everywhere these days. He is right, by the way, because in this era, a proper knight is strong enough to wipe out an entire mercenary band, so having one around is a huge boost for public safety. The bald chief quickly comes up with a plan and pushes Eldons to stay not just a few days but a few weeks and get proper rest, especially since Eldons himself said bandits are getting out of control. Eldons refuses and says they cannot impose like that, but then both of them keep insisting back and forth like besties while secretly thinking the worst about each other. Eldons knows Baldy is trying to steal his companions, and Baldy is thinking Eldons is getting in the way of his own plan. Meanwhile, the noble they are arguing over is out there starving like a broke traveler on the street. Then Goran walks up and drops a bag of gold coins in front of him, saying they sold the bandits weapons and belongings, and while it is not a fortune, it is still a decent amount. But our protagonist goes full goody two-shoes mode and tries to hand the bag back, telling Goran to split it among his men. Goran immediately refuses and says those soldiers surrendered to Johan, so the spoils should belong to him. Johan shows him a few coins and acts like he is fine with that, but he is absolutely not fine inside, because giving up money he earned with blood, sweat, and pain is hurting him bad. Still, our guy knows sticking with the mercenaries is way safer than running into the wolves of ActionToon alone, so he tells Goran he did not fight by himself, and that they all fought together, which means they are comrades in arms. After saying that, he leaves, and behind him Goran gets emotional and starts thinking Johan has the kind of heart that cares for people beneath him, which is what a real knight should be. Goran then goes back to the others and announces that Johan generously shared the money from the spoils, and he tells everyone to line up and get their share one by one. The mercenaries are suspicious at first, but then they start cheering for Johan once the coins are actually in front of them. Meanwhile, our boy is finally asleep on a proper bed for once, but trouble still follows him like a curse. Someone quietly opens his door and walks toward him with a dagger in hand, ready to kill him on the spot. Let's look at the backstory for why he is being targeted now. After Goran announces that he is splitting the spoils, everyone gets hyped. Meanwhile, Johan quietly looks at them and feels relieved because he realizes he has finally earned some goodwill from the mercenaries. Right then, an old man walks up and asks if he is the noble who came with Eldons, then offers to show him to their best room and tells him the katana company already paid for everything. Our guy does not question it at all because he assumes Eldons is just repaying him in his own way, and since he is exhausted, he follows the stranger. Back at the camp, Gamson is arguing with Goran and asking why he did not get a share when everyone else did. Goran tells him straight up that he hid during the bandit fight while the others fought, so he is not getting a single coin. Gamson gets bitter and starts thinking they are all leaving him out on purpose. Then his eyes land on Johan's shiny sword outside, and he makes a nasty face like a bad idea just popped into his head. Meanwhile, Johan takes a hot bath for the first time in what feels like forever, covered in blood and dust, and he is honestly so gone that simple things like warm water and a decent bed feel unreal. Back then, he never realized how much of a luxury even an old bed was. Even though he was born into a noble family, he used to think life was hard, but now the emperor has turned everything into chaos and left people dying everywhere. Johan knows he survived and is still better off than most, but even then he starts doubting himself and wonders if he should have accepted Karamov's offer. At this rate, he knows the Imperial army will eventually catch him and execute him. Then he remembers how those elves at the checkpoint could not mess with Eldons because they were cautious around the Katana Trading Company. He also remembers learning at the village market that trading companies in the same network share information and money across borders, and if a company is powerful enough, it can influence politicians, nobles, and even armies. That is when our protagonist decides that if he wants to survive while the Empire is hunting him, he has to get close to a trading company no matter what. So after the bath, our boy comes out ready to eat something and finally get real sleep. Johan is sleeping with his sword held against his chest when someone sneaks in with a dagger, but our guy reacts instantly, grabs the attacker's hand, and asks if he is one of Karamov's men. The attacker struggles, breaks free, and tries to run, but he slams into the door and exposes his face. Johan does not let him escape and drags him back into the room, ready to teach him the hard way that the man he picked a fight with is built different. Then we jump back 5 minutes earlier and see how this whole mess started. Gamson has cooked up another shady plan. Gamson and Prey sneak into the inn where Johan is staying, and Gamson asks if it is really okay to leave everything to Volan. Prace assures him it is fine because Volan is their strongest guy, and he even brought a dagger and a mask, so there is no way he gets caught. Another guy named Pell is in on it too, and while Volan handles Johan, Pell is supposed to steal the warhorse. Pell is a total horse fanatic from the village, and the moment he sees the warhorse, he is stunned by how tough and impressive it looks. Then he climbs right on top of it like he already owns it. Price asks Gamson if that noble sword is really that expensive, and Gamson tells him it has to be because it is the same sword that cleanly sliced a man in half, and he personally saw it cut 2 armored soldiers into pieces. So a sword like that cannot be cheap, and he convinces himself that the noble is nothing without it. That whole claim falls apart fast when they hear loud banging from the room. They sneak over and peek, and what they see is Johann moving like a monster while dragging Volan back inside. Gamson damn near wets himself and bolts immediately, sweating like crazy because he can tell something is seriously wrong with Johann, and now they are cooked. Pre panics and runs after him without even looking back. The old man wakes up in alarm and asks what they are doing now, but before he can catch them, they are already gone. Outside, Pell is waiting on the warhorse and sees them sprinting toward him. Gamson yells at him to get ready, and when Pell asks about Volan, Gamson snaps that Volan is dead or about to be dead any second. Then Gamson jumps onto the warhorse behind Pell, while Pre climbs onto another horse. Gamson is barely breathing and keeps smacking Pell to move faster before Johann catches them. But they are way too late, because our monster of a protagonist jumps down from the 2nd floor and comes after them red-handed for real. We cut to the southern outskirts of the Holy Empire, where 2 knights stand beside a tree covered with people who were executed while still alive. One soldier nails up a warning notice under the emperor's name, Cardirian Bizalfurk, declaring that these people stole a noble's property, and by imperial edict they and their family members were punished and hanged there. One knight asks what they could have stolen to end up like that, and the other replies that they stole 1 chicken and 3 eggs from Baron Dvorzab's territory. The moment he hears that, the first knight starts sweating, because they were hanged for something that small. Back at the village, Eldons is finally sitting down and enjoying a good meal, but his peace gets wrecked right away. A man rushes in and tells him that Gamson from the mercenary guild got caught trying to steal Johann's belongings. The second Eldons hears that, he jumps up and nearly panics on the spot. He was just planning to sweet-talk our guy into traveling with them all the way to Marcel, and now this mess drops in his lap. He quickly gives an order to capture Gamson and make it look like they had nothing to do with it. Then Eldons tries to calm himself down and reminds himself that he has survived plenty of disasters to get where he is, so he can get through this one too. Still, he knows he needs a plan for dealing with a noble if things go bad. At the same time, the village chief is in a meeting with the elders, and just after it ends, a man runs in and announces that the troublemakers were caught trying to steal the noble's belongings. Baldy gets furious and immediately yells at them to gather tribute for the noble right now. Then he adds one more wild order and tells them to throw in one of the slaves they have been keeping in the village. And on top of that, prepare to execute the troublemakers in front of the noble. The others push back on Baldy's decision, but he completely loses his temper and throws a chair to shut everyone up. Then he asks if they even understand how serious this is, and whether they already forgot the emperor's edict. He tells them they have to act first before that noble makes a move, because in his mind, that is the only way the village survives. The edict says that anyone who covets a noble's property can have their tongue cut out along with their immediate family, or be sentenced to hanging. Baldy says some places saw entire families wiped out over nonsense, and all because they demanded 1 chicken and 3 eggs for unpaid wages. He is furious at how cruel it is, but he is also terrified, and that fear is driving everything he is saying. The moment he says that, the people in the room go pale, especially one man who is related to one of the troublemakers. Baldy warns them that they already offended a noble, and nobody knows what punishment he might choose. He starts imagining the worst and says Johann could cut off the hands of everyone in the village while talking about knightly honor. One man tries to argue that this is Count Jarpen's territory, and maybe if they ask the Count for help, he might step in no matter how strong Johann's house is. But Baldy snaps back and says nobles only care about their own honor games, and never about whether commoners live or die. Nobody else can come up with a better plan, and a woman in the room starts crying. Then Baldy calms down a little, and says he does not feel good about any of this, but he believes the village only survives if they sacrifice the children. He apologizes to them and says he is doing it for the village's sake. The villagers gather around Johann and the troublemakers, who are tied up in front of everyone. Our guy puts on a cold noble face, but inside he is stressed because this whole thing got way bigger than he expected. He thought they were assassins sent by the emperor, but they are just dumb kids who tried to steal a sword that looked expensive. Johann realizes they probably only did it because he carried that sword out in the open, so he decides he needs to hide it from now on since this mess is partly on him too. His plan is simple: scare them a little, then let them go. Baldy walks up and asks if he is alright, but Johann answers roughly and asks if this village always welcomes guests by putting blades to their throats and looting their bags. Baldy drops down and starts smashing his bald head against the floor while apologizing on behalf of the kids, blaming himself for not controlling those idiots. Johann figures that is enough fear for one day, so he warns them to be careful next time and says they can all leave now. But Baldy has completely lost it. Ignoring Johann, he grabs one of the kids by the head and tries to make up for it by personally cutting off their heads. Johann moves to stop him, but Baldy keeps pushing the dagger forward anyway. That is when our boy snaps and slams his sword into the ground, then roars asking if Baldy did not hear him tell him to stop. That voice shakes everyone, and even Baldy gets so scared he nearly pisses himself. Then Johann turns to the villagers and asks if they have all lost their minds trying to kill someone over something this trivial. If they want those kids to pay, then make them pay with money. For a moment, silence spreads everywhere, and then our guy fixes his wording and asks how honor can possibly be more precious than a human life, and tells them to untie the kids and let them go. Baldy drops his dagger and starts crying from relief because he never expected Johann to make a call like that. He cannot believe a noble like this is real, and in that moment he realizes Eldons was telling the truth the whole time. The parents of Pell, Pra, and Vulan rush forward and hug their kids like they just got dragged back from death, and then the boys bow to Johann and thank him with everything they have. But Gamson stays the same as always, all stiff and bitter, and instead of showing gratitude he just makes that ugly twisted face again. He only has the mercenary speaking for him, so Can walks over and Gamson tells him to hurry up and untie him. In his head he is already whining about joining this trash mercenary group, and he still feels no remorse because he is thinking he only got caught this time, and he will pull it off next time. But there is no next time for him. Can grabs him by the hair, presses a dagger to his neck, and tells him to relax because it will make this easier. Before Gamson can even process what is happening, Khan drags the blade across his neck and sends him straight to the next world. As Gamson drops, Johann snaps, asking what the hell Khan thinks he is doing. Khan stays calm and tells him he only executed a man who coveted a noble's property, exactly as the Holy Emperor's edict allows. Our guy gets heated and says it looks like Khan did not take his words seriously when he told everyone not to spill blood. Kun answers without flinching, and says mercenaries have honor and rules too, and Gamson's cowardly actions trampled both the honor and the lives of their whole group. Then Khan turns the dagger around and offers it to Johann, telling him that if he still thinks he defied his authority, Johann can punish him himself. Johann gets where Khan is coming from and realizes Khan is trying to protect his mercenary code with his own life on the line. Our protagonist reaches out to take the dagger, but then he stops, pulls his hand back, and sincerely apologizes for not considering Khan's position. Everyone around them is stunned, because seeing a noble apologize to a common man is not something they expect to witness. On Johann's order, Khan lowers the dagger. Garin walks over in a panic, and nags Khan for not realizing how reckless it was to stand up to a noble like that, and Khan admits he did something reckless, and jokes that if he does it again, Garin should kick his ass. Eldons is seriously impressed by Johann now, and starts thinking our guy is a different kind of noble, upright and brave without acting like a tyrant. In his head, Eldons is already planning ahead, because if he introduces Johann to the Katana Trading Company, that connection could be huge, so he decides he needs Johann as an ally no matter what. By the end of the day, the peddler group gets ready to leave. Johann now has a watch that looks expensive as hell even though it is broken, and on top of that he somehow ends up with a pretty boy follower too. There is a reason for both of those. Before leaving, Baldy brings out gifts the village prepared as a reward, and Johann picks the watch because it looks high quality, even if he cannot tell it is broken yet. Then Baldy also offers him a slave and says the boy is good with geography and could be useful on the road. It is the first time our guy has seen a slave treated that badly, and he figures leaving the boy there would be dangerous, so he thanks Baldy and asks them to wash him and give him food first. The slave boy's name is Godin. Right now Godin is looking at Johann with shiny eyes like he already decided this man is his hero. But our protagonist feels weird about treating him like a slave. They take a break on the road and everyone gets meat and soup, all thanks to Johann giving up his share of the spoils. Godin also brings food for our boy and calls him master, but Johann tells him to stop saying that and just call him by his name. Godin gets flustered and turns shy while saying Johann's name, and our guy is not dense for once, so he starts wondering if Godin is actually a woman. He keeps that thought to himself for now, and asks how someone skilled in geography ended up as a slave. Godin hesitates and says it is a sad story that is not worth telling, but Johann keeps pressing him so he finally opens up. He says he used to be a peddler who transported and resold weapons in the eastern region, mostly delivering blacksmith-made weapons to nearby areas. Then one day he got dragged into smuggling gold on a noble's orders, and that changed everything. Johann says he is lucky to even be alive because smuggling gold usually means a death sentence, and then asks why a weapons merchant would take a risk like that. Gaudin explains that his younger siblings were sick, and he needed a lot of money to send back home. That is why he kept delivering and hiding the gold for the noble until the same noble suddenly reported him. Johann realizes Gaudin got used and then thrown away the second he was no longer useful. He asks if Gaudin ever demanded a trial, but Gaudin says he had no right to speak because of the emperor's edict. He could not even send money to his family because it got taken as bribes by the guards, and after saying that he starts crying hard with tears pouring down his face. Johan feels his teeth clench because this world is actually rotten, and if you have no power, people use you up and crush you like it is normal. He also knows he does not even have time to carry everyone's pain because he is still being hunted by the Emperor's army and could die any minute. Even so, our protagonist calls out to Godin and tells him they are comrades now, so he better not die and they are going to survive and live together. Godin just freezes and stares at him with no words left. Right then a man runs up to Johan and says a monster appeared in the forest, so our guy rushes off immediately and leaves Godin standing there confused. Johan reaches Kan and Goran, and they tell him it is too dark to see clearly, but there is definitely something in the forest. Johan senses what it is, then calmly tells them it is fine, and orders them to lower their weapons, which shocks both of them. Johan moves ahead to check the monster himself. Kan freaks out and thinks that no matter how brave a knight is, fighting a monster takes special skill, and even if you lure one into a trap and prepare everything right, it is still crazy dangerous. Goran also panics and agrees, saying their job is to protect Eldons and they cannot take any more risks. Our guy feels that same pressure again, the kind that can freeze a person's heart, and from those red eyes alone he realizes it is that same dark wolf. Even then he stays calm and keeps it together, because last time the wolf went after the elves, not him. It could still attack him any second, but nothing happens, so he walks a little closer and tells it to come out. The wolf finally steps forward, and Johan straight up reaches out and pets it while thanking it for saving him before. The others are stunned and cannot believe what they are seeing, and now they are wondering if this man somehow knows how to handle monsters too. The wolf sniffs around him for a second and then suddenly chomps down on his head. It looks insane, but it is actually just affection, so our boy pulls back and tells everyone to relax, because it is only the Black Wolf. But Eldons cuts in and tells him it is not just a Black Wolf, it is the Guide of the Dawn. Then he explains there is an old song in the Eastern Empire about it. In that song, during an age of great war under moonlight, a warrior gave a wolf the name Guide of the Dawn, and after receiving that name, the wolf bowed its head to him. Its blue eyes shined through the darkness, and whenever people saw it running at the front of the battlefield, they shouted Guide of the Dawn. By the end of the war that tore the continent apart, that warrior brought peace and died as a hero. The Black Wolf cried beside him for 3 days and 3 nights, and after that it set off on a journey to wherever order and heroes were needed. After hearing that story, Johan wonders if Eldons is mixing this wolf up with another one, because the one he knows is called the Black Wolf of Ill Omen. Eldons explains that the Guide of the Dawn comes from Eastern Empire folklore, and as the story spread south, some details changed. He says the popular version now is that the Guide of the Dawn punishes evil and submits to a hero. Meanwhile, the wolf is still busy playing with Johan's head like a giant overgrown dog. Eldons asks if he can pet it too, but the second he gets close, the wolf growls and squeals at him. Eldons backs off fast and decides he definitely should not try that, then notices it is only gentle with our guy. That makes him remember another line from the old folklore, the one that says if someone gives a name to the divine beast that follows them, it becomes their vassal. Now Eldon starts spiraling and wondering if this noble is actually some kind of hero. He asks Johan if he has given the wolf a name yet, but Johan says he has not had time, so Eldons tells him to do it now, because if the legend is real, something huge might happen. Johan agrees and decides to name it on the spot. The last time he saw this wolf was when he buried Karamov, so for some reason our boy names the wolf Karamov, and Eldons nearly loses his mind hearing that name. Then something wild actually happens. Karamov starts glowing red, and after that a blue beam hits him, changing that glow into a clear aqua blue. Johan gets excited first, then pets his new companion and admits Eldons was right. When he turns around, he sees Eldons kneeling in shock because everything happened exactly like the folklore said, and he is watching a myth become real in front of him. Eldons tells him he already respected Johan from the moment they met because he protected them from bandits, showed mercy to enemies, and carried himself with honor. Then he bows deeper and calls him the one chosen by the Eastern Divine Beast, and names Johan the hero of troubled times. The other guys are standing there with their mouths wide open. Johan brushes off all that hero talk and apologizes, saying he is not the hero Eldons thinks he is, and that he is just a wanderer from an insignificant house trying to make a living. Eldons does not take it badly at all, and instead asks for permission to introduce Johan to the Marcel trading company, so he can at least repay him for all the kindness he showed them. He explains that Marcel is famous as a free trade city, and most major trade routes pass through it. More importantly, Marcel is one of the few places the Emperor cannot easily touch. The second Johan hears that, his attention locks in. While Karamov keeps licking him like a giant loyal dog, our guy agrees to go with them because this feels like a jackpot. If the Emperor cannot reach Marcel and things go well, he might actually be able to start over there as a merchant. He just quietly hopes the whole hero rumor does not spread through the company and make things messy. Still, a small part of him thinks it would be nice if he really were that kind of hero. In both his past life and this one, he has always been a wanderer trying to hold his life together. His old life was not easy either, but this world is different, and at least here he can still push forward with his own hands. So now it is time to head to Marcel, the city of rich merchants. Something starts bothering Johann on the way to Marcel. A small puppy is one thing, but if a monster like Karamov walks into the city in full size, people are going to lose their minds. So he asks if the wolf can wait outside, but Karamov keeps pulling new tricks and uses some strange power to shrink down into a tiny puppy, the kind that instantly makes Godin melt. That reaction makes it more suspicious that Godin might actually be a girl, but for now our boy is just relieved Karamov can enter the city without causing trouble. Of course, life never goes the way he plans. The moment they step into Marcel, both Johann and Godin stare around like kids seeing a theme park for the first time, because the city is packed alive and full of movement. Then Karamov slips loose and starts running around town. People gather around the cute puppy right away and start fawning over it, and just like that, Johann's plan to stay low gets cooked. Godin eventually grabs Karamov and tells Johann they should buy a big bag for supplies, and says he can handle the shopping since he used to deal in equipment. Johann tells him he only has 4 silver coins, so Godin takes 1 coin and confidently says that is enough. Johann gives him a fake smile because he thinks there is no way 1 coin will cover all that. But around 50 minutes later, Godin comes back with a bag full of basic supplies, and our guy is stunned. Godin somehow got everything with 1 coin. He used his merchant skills to sell a broken helmet at a high price, picked up a large backpack for easier storage, and even talked his way into getting a mace for free. After buying vinegar, oil for preserving equipment, and other needed supplies, they still have change left. Johann does the math and realizes they started with 4 silver coins, and now they somehow have 12 silver coins and 10 copper coins. That is when he starts thinking if a broken helmet can sell for that much, then Karamov's buried gear must be worth a fortune. So he quietly decides that if he ever goes back there, he is absolutely digging it up and selling it. Johann notices Godin looks genuinely happy while doing familiar merchant work, which makes it obvious he really was a merchant before all this. So our guy asks if he truly liked his old job. Godin blushes and tells him he missed this life badly. He says being a slave meant never knowing when he might die, living every day in fear and despair. But now that he met Johann, it feels like he got his old life back. He even says that even if he had never become a slave, he still would have wanted to travel with him. Then he thanks Johann from the bottom of his heart, and hearing that makes our boy genuinely happy, so he tells Godin he is counting on him from now on. After that, they head out to explore Marcel. Johann, who has been getting dragged through hardship non-stop, is finally living a kind of happiness that blows his old wanderer life out of the water. At the inn, he almost cries from happiness because the jerky he ate on the road felt like chewing old shoes, while Marcel's food is on a whole different level. Back then, he could not even bathe properly, and his whole body stayed itchy. But here he can use warm water whenever he wants. When he was traveling, he never had a proper place to sleep, and every night felt like cold rocks were stabbing him. But now he gets soft blankets and a real bed. He basically turns into his happy chibi self and decides Marcel is amazing and starts thinking he should just settle down here for good. It is kind of funny and sad at the same time because our guy is getting emotional over basic things most people take for granted. Still, his life never lets him chill for long, and things always go sideways the moment he gets comfortable. The next day he walks around town with Gofton and Karamov, saying life feels peaceful and it has been forever since he could just walk through a street without stress. Then suddenly they hear a woman shouting that bandits attacked someone, stole all their goods and kidnapped Dane's daughter. So even Marcel is dealing with bandit problems, and that explains why the mood around town felt off to Gofton. Then they hear another scene nearby, with a man arguing at a stall and begging a shopkeeper for a meat skewer while promising he will pay later. The shopkeeper is not buying it, and the guy turns out to be an elf from the Wolves of Akaton. He got separated from the main group while chasing our guy, and after wandering around he somehow ended up all the way in Marcel. While he is still arguing, he suddenly notices Johann standing there, and both of them freeze and stare at each other. The elf loses at first and rushes in to attack, while Johann panics because he is confused and scared they came all the way here looking for him. He also knows fighting in the middle of town is the worst possible move, but before he can reach him, a sword drops across his neck and cleanly takes his head off. The one who does it is a long-haired man on horseback, and he casually says he thought the guy was a bandit, but maybe he was just a robber, and with security this bad lately, all kinds of people are slipping into the city. Then he turns with a calm face and asks Johann if he is alright. Our guy is still too shaken to answer, so Gordon responds and says they are fine. After that, the man rides forward and joins a larger group of mercenaries. He is the captain of the Oak Tree Mercenary Band, and his name is Bradil. He calls out to the people of Marcel and promises them that 500 Oak Tree mercenaries will wipe out the bandits and make the city safe again. Godin is stunned because he cannot believe he is seeing them in person since they are one of the top mercenary groups in the Empire, and they were clearly hired for this job. Johann, meanwhile, is stuck in his own head because he knows that if Bradil had not stepped in and killed that elf, he would have been exposed on the spot. If that happened, there is no way he could stay in Marcel while the Empire is hunting him. He remembers Karamov's words about how he would suffer from now on, but he pulls himself together and starts thinking straight. In his mind, the only real way to survive is by building a strong connection with the Katane trading company, because even the emperor cannot mess with a powerful company carelessly. Luckily, Eldon's already thinks highly of him, so he knows he has a chance to get close to them. The problem is, if his identity gets exposed before that, then nobody is saving him and he knows it. If that happens, he is dead immediately. So our guy decides he needs to go to the Katane company and secure their protection as fast as possible. Right then, someone suddenly calls him by name. A woman steps forward and introduces herself as Ibelka, the exclusive maid of the Katane trading company. She tells him she heard about his exploits from Eldon's and was impressed, so she wants to build a strong bond with him and his family. Then she asks if he is free, because she would like him to come with her to the Katana trading company. Sometimes Johan's luck really does hit the jackpot when he least expects it. Johan finally makes it to the company, and now he is nervous like he is walking into a job interview, hoping this whole talk goes in his favor. Then a pink-furred cat lady shows up, and she turns out to be the branch manager of the Katana company, Johan. Johan introduces himself and greets her, and they start the meeting over tea while she explains that it is a trade drink brought from the Mediterranean region, and hopes it suits his taste. Our guy smells it and instantly clocks that it is basically coffee in this world, then asks if it is made by roasting fruit seeds and brewing them. She confirms it and looks impressed, saying it is rare to meet someone who can tell that right away. After that, she gets to the point and says they can already guess why he came there, and the second Johan hears that, he almost throws up from panic because he thinks they figured out the emperor is hunting him, but she is actually misunderstanding him in a completely different way. Ion says he clearly carries ambition in his heart, and based on what Eldon's told her about him protecting innocents and showing mercy to surrendered enemies, she assumes a man like him came to Marcel because he wants to save the city from the bandits himself. Johan has no clue what she is talking about, but he decides to roll with it and tells her she saw right through him. Ion praises him and says ambition is not a flaw, it is a virtue of people who are truly worthy, and her company loves supporting worthy people with real goals. Then she drops a huge offer and says that if he wants, she can introduce him to the governor of Marcel. Our guy is hyped hearing that, because a governor is basically this world's version of a mayor, and in his head he is already stacking a survival plan with the company on one side and the governor on the other. If he can lock both of them in, then even if the emperor shows up, it gets way harder to touch him. He thanks Iran for the offer and asks what kind of support the Katana company sponsorship actually includes. She explains that it covers basically everything the company provides, including restaurants, inns, and even entertainment, and that he can use those services freely under Katana's name. The catch is that whenever the company needs him, he has to fight under their banner. Johan assumes she wants him to deal with the bandits around Marcel, but she says no, because the Oak Tree mercenaries already left for that. The company needs something else from him, and her whole vibe gets shady fast. With a nasty grin, she explains that more and more shop districts have been complaining that Katana is monopolizing the market, and the louder they get, the harder they are to control. So she tells him they want him to remove the members of those disgruntled groups, and she adds that it would be better if he removes their children too. She treats it like a normal condition, and asks what he plans to do. Johan is not feeling it at all. Later he leaves the building looking annoyed, and Godin is already outside waiting for him and asking what happened. Johan sulks for a few seconds, then suddenly grins and shouts, "Let's go suck on some honey." A little earlier in the meeting, he had already rejected Ion's offer and told her that in a city as big as Marcel, complaints are normal if one company controls too much. He says that if her answer to that is killing innocent people and their kids instead of talking it out, then he wants no part of it, and for that reason, he flat out refuses the deal. Ion looks displeased for a second, but then she smiles and tells him he passed. She explains that the whole thing was a test to see if he was worthy of the company's sponsorship, and asks the righteous knight to forgive her for pushing him like that. Johan asks if that means the monopoly talk and the complaints from shop districts were fake. Aeon tells him yes, because the Katana Trading Company does not monopolize distribution, and they are actually well liked by merchants since they move quality goods at fair market prices. She says they still want to keep the same terms they offered before, but that does not mean he has to rush into battle right away. The Oak Tree mercenaries already left to deal with the bandits, so for now he is free to rest and enjoy Katana's support. Then she reaches out her hand and our boy happily shakes it and accepts the deal. Back in the present, Godin looks confused and asks what Johan meant when he yelled that they should go suck on honey. Johan tells him it basically means they should go eat something expensive using Katana's money. Godin realizes Johan handled himself well with the big shots and congratulates him, and our guy starts feeling good because for once everything is actually going his way. The bandits are still making trouble around Marcel, but he figures once the Oak Tree mercenaries wipe them out, the city will calm down and he can finally live the peaceful life he has been chasing. Of course, his bad luck never leaves him alone for long. Suddenly they hear a scream, and when they run toward it, they find dead bodies dumped in the open with maggots crawling over them. Goran is nearby and tells Johan the bandits have been getting more brutal in Marcel, and after killing merchant families, they leave the bodies out like this to terrorize the city. People who see the bodies start panicking, and the whole crowd begins shouting that nothing is being solved and Marcel should be held responsible. One person even blames the emperor, and says the rumors must be true that he is the one stirring up the bandits, but then a bunch of others instantly jump on him for insulting the emperor. So now the crowd splits, with some people openly cursing the emperor, while others defend him and argue back. Johann looks at the mess and realizes the peaceful Marcel he was hoping for is already falling apart, all because of these bandits, and he starts wondering what the Oak Tree mercenaries are even doing out there. Back at Katana, a maid rushes to Johann and tells her there is bad news. Johann already knows about the dumped bodies and asks what the Oak Tree mercenaries are doing, but the maid tells her they have not been able to contact them at all. Then she drops the real bomb and says the liaison's corpse was found in horrible condition near the forest outside Marcel. Isan goes pale, hearing that because the Oak Tree mercenaries have military-level strength and she cannot imagine them getting wiped by some random bandit group. She immediately calls the maid by name and orders her to bring Suedelga, the mage of the Apal River. She wants him to use his prophecies so they can confirm whether the mercenaries were really taken down. At the Ipal River, an old man who is probably Sueldga speaks to himself and says Katana got it wrong, and searching for the mercenaries will not change anything. Then he moves his hand across the water and Johann's reflection appears in it. That tells him the man who killed the emperor's dog is hiding inside Marcel's money pouch, but things are not going to go the way Johann expects, which honestly tracks because bad luck has been glued to our protagonist this whole time. The next day, Subaiga shows up at the Katana Company in Marcel. A maid welcomes him and thanks him for coming on such short notice, but he is already in a bad mood and snaps that she claims to be thankful while sending a driver who handled the carriage like a maniac. The maid panics and apologizes, then turns to call Aijian, but Subaiga stops her and says that if this were truly urgent, Aijian would have come down herself. She tries to insist, but he cuts her off and tells her not to make him repeat himself, then sits down and quietly thinks he should be able to meet Karamav's killer here. At the same time, Johann is also coming to the building because today is the day he is supposed to meet the governor, and he is locked in on getting the governor on his side so he can settle in Marcel for good. While he is walking, Karamav starts growling, so our guy asks what is wrong. Then he spots the old man, and Karamov goes tense while staring at him. The old man comments that Karamov is not a fitting name for a divine beast, which instantly leaves Johann speechless, and now he is wondering how this stranger already knows what Karamov really is. Johann asks who he is, and the old man introduces himself as Suidga, the sage of the Efal River, which means he is basically a mage. That makes Johann light up right away, because he is still a fantasy nerd at heart, so he steps closer and says it is an honor to meet him, and he always wanted to meet a mage. The old man even blushes a little at the praise, but then casually drops that Johann looks pretty comfortable for someone being hunted by the emperor. That hits our boy like a truck and he asks how he knows that. Suedelga explains that through the Ifil River he can see the past and future with magic, or more exactly through the mystery of the river itself. Johann asks if he plans to report him to the emperor, but Suedelga just asks why he would bother. He tells Johann he is a seeker of mysteries, not a lapdog for politics, and the power of the river is what guides him, not the petty fights of nobles and rulers. He also points out that if he really wanted to expose him, he would have done it quietly already, instead of talking about it right in front of him. Our guy starts thinking this old man is actually trustworthy, so he jumps in and grabs his hand saying he wants to hear about magic. The old man is low-key surprised, because most knights would act all snobby, talk down to him and call him some coward scholar who knows nothing about honor in battle. But Johann is the opposite, and looks straight up obsessed with magic. That tracks, because our boy instantly sees this as his chance to learn magic and become a magic swordsman, and if he pulls that off, his survival chances go way up. The old man agrees to teach him, but he says just explaining it directly would be boring, so he challenges Johann and tells him if he wins one round in a game he will teach him. Johann assumes he means chess, so he suggests wrestling instead, and immediately starts imagining himself twisting the old man's arm. Subaya already knows Johann has the clear advantage there, so he tells him to follow him, and says it is not chess, then adds that the game of kings is fun, but it does not compare to the game of gods. A little later, the old man pulls out 2 pots and a board, and that is when Johann realizes he is talking about Go. Subaya all assumes it will look complicated to him, so he reassures him that he will go easy. Big mistake, because Johann has a hidden buff from his past life, and already won a Go tournament before, so now he is fully confident he can win and snatch that magic knowledge. 50 minutes later they are still playing, and Sudelga is already asking to take back a few moves. Johann shuts that down immediately, because the old man has already asked for takebacks like 5 times. Sudelga starts whining that he cannot believe he is losing at the game of gods, then asks if this is really Johann's first time playing, because even the Sultan of the Eastern Empire could not beat him. Johann obviously does not spill the truth and just tells him it is because Sudelga taught him so well while they were playing. Even then, Sudelga refuses to give up and begs for one more round, promising that if he loses again, he will give Johann a gift that will help him in life. Our boy hears gift and instantly thinks magic item, so he agrees and asks how many handicap stones he wants. The old man gets a little embarrassed and quietly asks for 3 stones. They start the new game, and while placing stones, the old man asks why Johann even wants to learn magic when he is born a noble. Johann tells him straight up that the emperor wants his head, so having more tools would help him stay alive. That is when the old man drops the bad news and says if Johann wants magic for battle, they should stop right there, because magic is not useful in combat. Johann is caught off guard and asks how magic cannot be used for fighting. Suelga explains that he has heard some people do apply it in combat, but that is not what true mages focus on. He says mages discover mysteries in nature, with some finding them in wind, some in fire, and a few in the smoke of burning sulfur. And he even mentions one fool who bragged about discovering a mystery in the Black Forest. He tells Johann those discovered mysteries are called spirits, and mages borrow power from them. Most of the time spirits lend their power without asking for anything, but sometimes a mage's own whims demand a fatal price, so he warns Johann that if he ever comes into contact with a mystery, he better not go against its will. Johann gets a little disappointed hearing all that, because his magic swordsman plan pretty much dies on the spot, and now he is even wondering if magic items are real in this world. Right then, Eikon finally finds out Suelga is there, and immediately scolds the maid for not telling her sooner. The maid explains that he strongly insisted she tell no one, so Eikon heads over and walks into the room, where the vibe is already pure chaos. She quickly realizes Suelga is playing the game of gods with Johann and messing around as usual, but then she gets genuinely shocked when she hears Suelga asking to take back another move while losing at his own favorite game. Johann is fully over it by now and tells him to just accept the loss already. Ion steps in, walks over to Suelga and sweet-talks him, saying that if he came to Marcel he should have sent for her, then asks if he has been enjoying himself with Johann. Suelga laughs and tells her he was only playing with the knight, but now that the branch manager is here, he will end the match. Then this snobbish old man suddenly goes soft and hands Johann 2 bottles filled with liquid. When Johann asks what they are, Suelga tells him they are flasks containing the final secrets of the Ifel River, also known as the Water of Wrath and the Water of Blessing. At the Oak Tree Mercenaries outpost, the men are already shook and staring deep into the forest, at something that does not look human at all. It feels more like a monster with strange eyes and a nasty aura, and the last thing we hear is them screaming like they are getting wiped out on the... Back at the Katana Company, Johann picks up the magic flasks with full excitement, and the old man explains that the Ifel River has guarded a secret since ancient times, which is the mystery of life and death. He tells Johann he spent his whole life trying to uncover it, but the river never revealed it to him until Johann showed up. He explains that as long as Johann's head is not completely destroyed, the red flask can heal him no matter how bad the injury is. Then he points to the green flask and adds that a single drop from it can melt a person, which gets Johann hyped because he never thought he would actually get magic items this crazy. Suelga then turns to Eikon and asks if she called him for prophecy work, and she confirms it, telling him bandits have been causing trouble around Marcel and there are already casualties. She adds that Katana sent the Oak Tree Mercenaries to deal with it, but they lost contact with them. The old man cuts in and tells her they already failed 3 days ago, because the Ifel River showed him a prophecy that the will of the oak tree would be trampled by steel like rock, and their fate would be cut down behind a veil before they could stop the flames swallowing the city. He basically tells her the Oak Tree Mercenaries are most likely gone, and Aeon cannot believe a top mercenary group got folded by bandits. She says they need a city council meeting right away, then tells Johann this is his time to act under the council banner. At the meeting all the big shots gather, including our guy and the governor, and the last one to arrive is Baron Einbeck von Auvergne. The second Johann sees the red hair and that wild mustache, he makes the same face we all would, and starts thinking this era really has some strange-looking people. Meanwhile, the governor addresses everyone and introduces himself as Villaco, and the man is smooth with both face and presence, so Johann is already planning to make a clean impression and lock in his place in Marcel. The governor thanks all the families for making time to attend the meeting, and before anything starts he introduces a noble from the Yates family, who is sponsored by the Katana Company, Johann. Our Pookie gives a simple greeting to everyone and says he will do his best, but he is low-key nervous, which is honestly fair because any normal person would be. Then the weird Baron jumps in and throws shade, saying the mercenary group hired by the Katana Company failed to crush the bandits, so what exactly happened? He keeps going and says if they had asked the Holy Empire for help, the whole problem would already be solved by now. The second he says that, the anti-emperor side starts yelling that the bandits only showed up because of the emperor in the first place, so they should be the ones taking responsibility. Then the pro-emperor side fires back and starts shouting at them for insulting the emperor, and the whole room turns into a mess. Johann is just sitting there trying to survive the noise, barely catching a word, and he quickly realizes way too many people here support the emperor, which means he is cooked if his identity ever gets exposed. Then the governor calmly steps in and calls for order, and everyone goes quiet instantly, which catches our boy off guard. Ein picks it up from there, and explains that the governor already has a backup plan, which is to send a second subjugation force and hit the bandits at their source. That plan leaves both sides stunned, and even the weird mustache guy cuts in to praise the governor for such a wise move. He adds that he only has to say one word, and the emperor will send troops at any time, which instantly makes Johann panic because the word troops alone has him imagining his own execution. Our guy is silently praying. The governor says no. The governor replies politely and tells the baron he has already done a lot for the council and that his help is always appreciated. Then he respectfully declines the offer, saying His Majesty is likely busy because of the recent rebellion in the north, and he wants to lighten that burden even a little. He announces that Marcel will organize a new mercenary force instead, and Johann will be part of it. The weird baron pulls back and says if that is what the governor wants, then he hopes the emperor will still recognize his loyalty, while Johann quietly lets out a huge breath and notices the weird baron is clearly pro-emperor, and also pretty close to the governor. The meeting wraps up and the council members prepare a modest tea gathering while Johann encourages everyone to join the tea party. As people start getting up to leave, the governor calls out our guy and asks for a little spare time, and our boy instantly starts planning his escape, in case this man is pro-emperor, because his luck stays cursed. The governor takes Johann to his room for a private talk, and that already looks suspicious to the weird baron. Our protagonist can feel the vibes getting weird, and he is low-key stressed before the talk even starts. The governor asks what house he belongs to, and Johann hesitatingly replies that he is Johann Yates from the Yates family. The governor acts familiar with the Yates family and mentions they are known for their northern specialty, with date palm-infused liquor, and he even says he already has some liquor from their house. Johann gets shocked and starts wondering if a family with that name really exists, because he only tweaked his own family name a little. The governor pours him a glass of liquor to refresh his old memories, and our guy actually drinks it without pushing back. Then the governor asks how his family has been doing, because he heard the emperor's cold sword swept across the north and many houses were purged. He adds that the survivors scattered across the land and are now making a living through banditry, which makes the whole room feel even heavier. He keeps going and brings up one of those purged houses, saying a man from it is wanted for treason, and that house was called House Eitz. It hits hard because this governor is clearly sharp and already peeped our Pookie boy and his whole background. Johann is basically on the verge of crying, but he still plays dumb and says he has no idea and is hearing that name for the first time. The governor lets out a fake laugh, and then he drops the next blow without missing. He tells him the drink he just had was not date palm-infused liquor from the Yates house at all, and it was only cheap whiskey distilled in a nearby region. His face turns cold after that and he asks why they should keep playing this pointless word game. Johann Eitz, trying to get on the governor's good side, really backfires, and this turns into the worst timing possible for our boy. Our protagonist is now fully caught, and the room stops feeling like a talk and starts feeling like a trap. Johann is soaked in sweat after his identity is exposed. However, the governor assures him that he will not hand him over to the emperor, or maybe he will. Our protagonist asks what he means by that, and the governor explains that his decisions are only for Marcel's benefit, whether this city needs a pro-emperor faction or an anti-emperor one. He will use the balance between them to protect the city, and the most important task at hand is the bandit gang. He needs to wipe them out, earn merit, and prove this city needs him. Otherwise, he will send him to the emperor. Later, Johann sulks around town and tells himself that he finally got to Marcel and thought he was going to live an easy life. But it turns out this is just another shackle around his neck. Now Governor Villico knows him, and he wonders if he should run away. Then he remembers the hardships he faced during the journey, and he changes his plan. Nothing in this world is free, so he gets motivated and decides he will get on Villico's good side and settle down here. Godin standing beside him shows him the subjugation force that has been gathered for him. The second subjugation force consists of the Red Iron Mercenaries, the Saint Iona Monastery, and even the Saint Galanto Monastery. Godin cannot believe such big shots are gathered at one time, and all of them are famous. The Saint Galanto Monastery is a male-centered order of holy knights and is famous for its alchemy. The Saint Galanto Monastery is a female-centered order of holy knights, and it is said to be powerful enough to hunt trolls. The Red Iron Mercenaries are mostly deployed in siege battles, and they value honor and loyalty like dwarves, but at the same time they are said to be open-minded. Moreover, Count Batrock's knights also join the team, and they are elves from Urangs renowned for their bravery and skills. Johann has had a bad experience with elves, but let us see how this one goes. Ion thanks the head of the Red Iron Mercenaries, Kamal, for answering her call, and she introduces Johann as the knight from the company who will be fighting with them. Johann says he will be in their care, but Kamal asks him not to be formal. Johann apologizes and says he cannot be casual with the captain of the forces, and he asks if Kumal does not have to uphold his pride in front of his men. Kumal is impressed by him and still allows him to be casual with him. Now he wonders how the Holy Knights will be moving. Valian, who is the vanguard commander of the Saint Ina Monastery, and Agante, who is the vanguard of the Galanto Monastery, both agree to move with Kumal's men. so Kumal offers his thanks for the Holy Knight's consideration. Johan is impressed that this dwarf captain is pretty decent, and he does not really get why the subjugation captain has to ask for consent over command authority, but he likes that Kumal is very reasonable. Just then, a knight from Bartok named Gustav shows up and asks Ayan why she gathered so many troops when his troop alone is enough. His two right-hand men who seem to be twins agree with him too. Gustav notices our guy and asks if he is the knight who will fight under the company's banner. Johan introduces himself as being from House Whites, but Gustav says he has never heard of that house. He adds that they cannot be bothered to pay attention to some low-key house like his, and if Johan gets in the way on the battlefield, they will not show mercy. He also says they will not take any commands from a dwarf captain, and he tells Wyon to prepare a grand feast for them. After running his mouth for a while, he leaves. Johan now understands why the dwarf asked about command authority, because people like that make it a problem. He still believes they can wipe out the bandits with this lineup, even if those elf bastards are painfully obnoxious. Well, he was right, because elves are still rude in this experience too. Just then, a maid arrives and whispers something to Ayona. After that, Ayon tells Johan that someone wants to meet him in the evening. Before we learn who it is, the scene shifts to the night before the bandit subjugation. A large party is thrown for the Bartok troops. The twins keep enjoying the night with drinks and pretty women, and they reassure everyone that they will subjugate the bandits without fail. Supselujga is also there, and he feels really bothered by the crowd. A question comes up about why he is even there when he looks so annoyed. Well, it is because refusing a drink can sometimes be taken as an insult in this world's noble etiquette, since it implies they do not trust the other party. Meanwhile, our boy calmly walks into the hallway and heads to a room where a man in a covered robe is sitting. Johan asks who wanted to see him, and the man tells him to sit first. Johan looks at the alcohol and wonders if nobles in this world really drink it every day. The man pours alcohol into a glass and asks if Johan is marching tomorrow to wipe out bandits just for money. Our protagonist gets pissed and asks who he is to ask such a rude question the moment they meet. The man pulls down his cover and it turns around. He is the obnoxious red-haired weird man. He says Marcel claims neutrality, yet in practice it behaves like the anti-emperor faction. Then he asks if Johan understands what he is trying to tell him. Johan flat out says no and apologizes, saying he is not good with complicated things. Hearing that answer makes the weird baron panic for a moment, and then he says he figured Johan would say that much. He then gives him a lesson and says a merchant needs two things, which are profit and strength. If the Katana Company is backing Johan, that means he is their strength, someone who knows how to fight. He says he looked into Johan and could not find his house, although a house with a similar name did exist and was wiped out for treason against the emperor. Not only the leader but the serfs and every last one of them were wiped out too. Anyway, he says a nameless house is not much help to a trading company. Whether Johan is from House Eitz or Yaitz does not matter, because they took him into Marcel after seeing his strength. Johan asks what he wants from him, and in response the weird baron tells him not to go for the bandit subjugation. Instead, he tells him to use his strength for the emperor. The weird baron promises him a reward greater than what the Katana Company offers. Johan takes a moment to think and says he will get a chance to become part of the empire's core, receive a formal knighthood, and obtain wide fertile land. If he follows the weird baron and the emperor, only dazzling glory and peace will lie before him. Johan continues and says it is the nature of the world for the weak to spill blood and for the strong to drink. The weird baron strongly agrees and says the one who loses is at fault, and Johan has it absolutely right. His punchable face looks even more twisted with excitement. But then Johan calmly refuses and reveals that a man claiming he carried the emperor's command entered his domain and slaughtered his innocent family and his people. He says that man offered him the same thing and asked him to become the emperor's sword, and of course he refused. However, there is one major difference here. That guy died by Johan's own hands. The weird baron starts panicking and trembling in fear. Johan continues that he crushed the head of the emperor's direct knight for the serfs, who were treated like worms and scattered all over the ground without any hesitation. Now the weird baron learns in terror that Karamov is dead. Johan tells him the truth that he is the survivor of House Eitz that was wiped out. He drinks the alcohol in the glass and then smashes it onto the table, breaking both the glass and the table with his bare hands. The weird baron has no choice but to piss his pants. Johan declares that he will wipe out the bandits, not for the emperor and not for Marcel. Since the weird baron gave him life lessons, our guy gives him advice and says it is in his best interest not to tell anyone what he saw or heard tonight. If he does not listen to the warning, then next time they meet it will not be a cup and a table, it will be him. After that, Johan leaves the room in a rush and in anger, but then he starts to hallucinate and bleed from his nose. He can feel his heart pounding and becomes unable to breathe. It is too late when he realizes he just drank poison mixed in the drink. Then he falls to the ground, bleeding out and wondering if this is how he meets his end. Meanwhile, the weird baron gives his creepy Joker-like smile. Guys, is our protagonist an idiot for spilling everything and drinking from a stranger he could not trust from the start? Let us see if he dies or if some magic happens. Out there at the party, pretty bouncy women surround our little Gudin and think he is too cute to be in the mercenary group. But he is the shy and innocent type, so he runs away from his good fortune. He roams around the building, calls out for Johan, and asks him to get out of here quickly. But then he sees him lying on the ground. He rushes over at once, and after he pulls him into his arms, he sees Johan has already bled a lot. In panic, he starts calling for help and begs Johan to hold on. But in this pitch-dark building, no one hears him because everyone is enjoying the party outside. Godin is actually sane and smart, so he pulls out the potion Suichgao gave Johan and feeds it to him. He hopes Johan will get better soon. Later, Johan actually comes back to his senses and rinses his bloody mouth with water. He thanks Godin for saving his life, and he is also grateful to Suichga, who is there too, for giving him the water of blessing. Suichelga says Johan really did something stupid here. He knew the weird baron was from the pro-emperor faction, and yet he still went to meet him. He adds that if Johan is going to do something reckless again, then he should die quickly. That way they can save the remaining water of blessing. Johan understands what he means, and promises to use the half of it wisely. Anyway, the old man asks if he caught the weird baron, because if he wants to prove the charges, he needs that guy to be there. Johan tells him that by the time he barged into the room again with Khan and Goran, the weird baron was already gone and had fled. But he says he found something important. It is a letter the weird baron could not take with him when he ran, and everything about the whole incident is mentioned in it. The old man wonders if it is proof related to the rumors about the emperor hiring the bandits, but Johan denies that and says it is something more serious than that. Meanwhile, the weird baron flees from Marcel believing Johan is dead, and everything is going according to the emperor's plan. He goes to a nearby place where his army is positioned, and he addresses them, telling them they are not bandits but mercenaries of the strongest empire, bound by the gold of the Holy Empire. They swear loyalty to the great emperor, and dazzling glory will follow them. For a long time he undermined Marcel from within, and now their plans and strategies are in the palm of his hands. They have fallen into chaos and they will die without even knowing who the enemy is. After his shouting, his army also shouts to cheer him on. He also tells them that His Majesty personally sent an imperial court mage. After that announcement, the mage actually shows up and introduces herself as Janina, an imperial court mage favored by the emperor himself. She is a snake beastman, but those knights have never heard her name before. She expects that from them and explains that she is not someone who merely uses trivial elements but a living weapon. She pulls out a round flask from her bouncy boobies and releases some kind of gas that spreads everywhere. A terrifying troll rises from the ground and will stand shoulder to shoulder with them. The weird baron starts blabbering again and says tomorrow is the day they will crush Marcel's second subjugation force. He says they will offer Marcel to the emperor. Then the words "Long live the emperor" echo across the ground after the weird baron's declaration of war. Back at the company, Johan gives the document to Godin and tells him to deliver it to the governor without letting anyone know. He thinks this is something the governor should verify himself. At the same time, he calls Khan and Goran inside to talk to them. The old man wonders why Yahello River is trying to protect Johan. He also wonders what it wants to do through him. The next day, the whole subjugation team stands at Marcel's gate, and they are ready to set out. Johan is also ready to go, and he tells Godin to take care of Suelka for him. But this is not the first or second subjugation for the old man, so he tells Johan to worry about himself. With that, Johan sees them off and joins Kumal up ahead. One guy is about to blow the horn and Kumal is about to announce that all troops should advance, but Gustav cuts him off by shouting and moves forward without caring about the others. When his group leaves, Kumal repeats the order, and the horn is blown to begin their journey. Governor Velako stands on the balcony, where Rion informs him that the second subjugation team has departed. He shows her the letter sent by Johan and asks if she checked it. She says yes, and tells him they found it yesterday in the weird mustache guy's room. Velako cannot believe the letter is genuine, especially with a web of grudges between houses involved. Ion assures him the weird mustache baron is behind it based on the crest and the contents of the letter. They tried to press the weird mustache baron, but he had already slipped out of the city. That alone is more than enough to suspect him. But the governor still does not trust Johan, and he is concerned that the Katana company is placing too much trust in him. Ion explains that her company does not support anyone unless they are worthy. The governor says he understands, but he warns her that if Johan's misguided actions shatter the balance inside the city, the Katana company will not be able to avoid responsibility either. Ion gets nervous and starts to think he might be from the pro-emperor faction. At the pro-emperor faction, the weird baron sits across the table with Janina and Duke Mayhem, and he receives news that the subjugation team has already set out. He is 100% sure Marcel is in their hands, so he passes the news to his fellows, and the Duke says he cannot wait to take over Marcel, and the first thing he wants is to patrol the brothels. For some reason, our guy with the weird mustache looks worried about something, and asks Janina if she has heard anything about Karamov, like something going wrong on his expedition or a serious injury. Janina and the Duke burst out laughing because Karamov getting hurt sounds like a huge joke to them. They explain that Karamov is the Empire's strongest, even in swordsmanship, and he is practically wrapped from head to toe in legendary equipment. That means he is the core of the Empire's military power all by himself, so something happening to a man like that is almost impossible. The weird Baron feels a little better and decides what Johann said about Karamov was a lie to trick him. Good thing he killed him, and even if he had lived, he would have been worthless. On the other hand, Johann's group arrives at a certain point and sees that Gustav's unit has already swept through the area clean. Those elves ask if they are finally getting there and taunt them that they are slow, just as expected from dwarves. The dwarf captain politely corrects them and tells them he is the dwarf there, while Johann is the noble, but then he gets furious and asks them to show some respect before he crushes their pointy ears. Our protagonist realizes dwarves and elves really do not get along well. He holds Kumal back and asks the elf where everyone went after the battle. The elf replies that Gustav and the other knights wiped the area clean and are now leading the main force in pursuit of the remaining bandits. That elf makes it clear that every bit of loot and every prisoner belongs to Gustav, and since Johann's group arrived late, they have no right to demand anything. The dwarf boss taunts him back and says they have already been paid enough by the trading company, so the pointy ears can split the loot among themselves. Johann senses something is wrong here because the bandits wiped out the oak tree mercenaries who had 500 men, and yet this fight ended way too one-sided. It looks like the elves did not take even a single casualty. He looks over and notices the forest on the right is the perfect place for an ambush. He asks the elf if they searched that forest, and the elf gives him a sour answer and asks if they plan to hunt wild animals or something. Johann knows it then and figures the bandits retreated on purpose to lure them deeper into the forest. Those elves are just arrogant idiots for falling into such an obvious plan. As the dwarf boss announces they should march forward, Johann stops him for a moment and orders the men to get into defensive formation right now. He also orders all shooters to focus fire into the forest. The dwarf boss says the plan feels a bit sloppy, but Johann explains that if an enemy is lying in ambush inside that forest, the terrain puts them in serious danger, so they need to make sure before they pass through. The dwarf boss casually says they can just crush the bandits anyway. Our boy shuts that down and says they wiped out the famous oak tree mercenaries, so they cannot treat them like ordinary bandits. Before the main force goes any deeper, they need to confirm it now. The dwarf boss hesitates and says if they pour fire in there, and it turns out they were wrong, those pointy ears will humiliate them and call them cowards who got scared of mere bandits. Johann says that if he can trade his honor for their lives, then he will throw that honor away, as many times as it takes. The dwarf boss accepts his opinion without resisting any further. Johann is glad they listened to his plan this time, unlike last time when he gave orders to Can and the others. The dwarf boss commands the knights to form a defensive line and orders the shooters to fire into the deep forest. Once they start firing, they realize the arrows are hitting something, and there really is an ambush waiting there. It is not a bandit but a monster in heavy armor. The scene shifts to the past when Johann asks Khan and Goran if they know anything about the bullhead mercenaries. Khan has heard about them and informs our boy that they are pretty well known among the mercenary groups. There is an elf mercenary group called Wolves of Akiton, and they say the bullhead are more expensive than them. They are very shrouded in secrecy, and because they charge a high fee, they do not take just any job. From what is known, their movements are like a herd of enraged bulls and they charge straight into the center of the enemy formation. They break through the defensive formation and collapse the enemy from the inside. Johann compares this tactic to Germany's Blitz tactic in World War II. Goran asks if Johann believes they will be fighting them tomorrow. Johann agrees and tells them the group they will be facing are not bandits but the Emperor's elite mercenaries. Khan advises that if they run into them, he must retreat at once. And whatever he does, he must avoid a head-on clash because of a rumor that they can command a minotaur. Johann panics a little because he heard about it when he was little, and it has a massive body and overwhelming strength. On top of that, it has intelligence close to a human's. They say countless warriors and knights challenged it and ended up getting slaughtered. Goran proudly tells him not to worry and says they will risk their lives to help Johann retreat. Goran goes on and says he wanted to see those bullhead bastards himself, though they will probably have to run without even getting a good look. Khan shares the same opinion. Johann grins and appreciates their feelings, but says he was already planning to ask for their help. We do not get to see what he plans to do, and the scene returns to the present. Those damn bullhead bastards hide in the forest and wonder why Marcel's group is changing formation. Then suddenly they get hit head-on by arrows and fire from their enemies. Some of them die on the spot, while nothing happens to the ones in heavy armor, and those guys get ready and march forward with the Minotaur. The dwarf boss sees them coming and recognizes them right away, even though he only heard about them before. Johann worries that they prepared for an ambush, but somehow it has turned into a frontal collision, and now he has to do something about it. He orders the dwarf boss to brace for impact while he goes to deal with the enemy formation. After saying that, Johann pushes forward, and meanwhile Kumal gets his team ready for the incoming attack. As our guy charges in, the bullhead mercenaries see him coming alone and think he has lost his mind. They think if he is that eager to die, they will grant his wish, but the first one to die is the man who was acting arrogant. Johann cuts his head off in one shot. He keeps moving forward and keeps crashing into them. But one of the bullhead men notices that our boy is trying to break their formation. He shouts that they need to hold their breakthrough formation. Johan looks back and realizes the enemy has already caught on to his plan, and now both sides are about to collide. On Kumal's order, the dwarves hold a defensive wall with their shields. But the bullhead mercenaries are tougher and more stubborn than expected, so they break through the defense line and slam into the dwarves at the front. Even then, Kumal charges in with the knights. He is the commander for a reason, and he strikes the bullhead fighter in front from below and knocks him out in one hit. Then he pulls out both weapons, charges them with burning fire, and orders his warriors to soak their burning blades with enemy blood. Johan feels relieved because he knows he does not need to worry about them now. The only thing left is the monster at the front. Our Pookie charges forward alone to fight the Minotaur and the bullhead men behind it. Johan charges forward straight at his enemies. An ugly bull steps in front of the Minotaur and arrogantly asks for permission to end Johan's life with his own hands. He is the boss of Group 10 and he braces himself along with his members to send our boy to another world. But our Pookie folds them instantly and knocks them out with one hit, defeating their whole group in just a few seconds. Now he moves to the Minotaur, who is also a captain of Group 100 and has the name Numeros. Johan asks him if he is the captain of these mercenaries. The Minotaur does not answer his question and tells him to get off the horse because when he chops Johan into pieces, his horse might get hurt. He says he likes the way Johan's horse carries itself, which is low-key funny in the middle of all this smoke. Johan also steps down from the horse, saying he does not want his horse getting hurt either, since it was named after his brother. Moreover, if he wins, he will make a stew out of this monster's tail. He challenges the Minotaur to come at him and calls him a gift set-looking bastard. The Minotaur blanks for a second because that term belongs to the real modern world. Anyways, the sturdy Minotaur pushes forward with his thick legs and swings his axe. Johan pulls back to dodge that attack, but the Minotaur keeps pressing him, and he keeps dancing around him. However, Johan realizes the difference in power is huge, and if that ugly man's axe even grazes him, he is cooked for sure. Minotaur challenges him to come forward like a true honorable knight and die the same way. Our boy dodges that attack again and finally finds an opening. Maybe he just snatched an idea straight out of Naruto and uses his secret technique. He drives his dagger into the back of the Minotaur and leaves him completely guardless and basically cooked. The Minotaur does not even have the strength to keep standing and suffers in pain. Johan then rushes forward to give him the finishing blow. On the other hand, the dwarves are fully busy and heated up while dealing with the Oxhead bullies. They keep pushing forward and try to overthrow them with numbers. The knights from the St. Galanto monastery also get serious, and their leader Agante gives the order to begin. They all drink something blue, and after that their eyes turn blue and they go berserk, smashing every enemy in their path. One ox-headed guy is about to hit Agante, but then Valian shows up and cuts him into pieces. He tells Agante to get up since there are people who need him. Back there, a guy from the Bullhead mercenaries tries to raise the morale of his group. He tells them not to fall back and says Numeros will crush that bastard hero and come back to join them. But the very same hero knocks out Numeros instead and asks if he has any last words. Numeros turns out to be a pathetic guy and begs for forgiveness, saying even if Johan takes his life, it will not help him. He says about himself that he is not a real Minotaur, but a half-blood, and he is not as strong or as smart as the pure-blooded ones. That is why even if Johan kills him, it will not even count as an achievement. Johan stays calm and says he has no idea what kind of achievements he is talking about. He orders a bugler from the Bullhead mercenaries to inform the ones who went ahead that they have been defeated. While making a villainous face, he also points at Numeros and says he wants him to witness this and tell only the truth. Right there, Numeros realizes he is absolutely cooked. The mercenaries who were hoping Numeros would come help them hear the lost call from their bugler, and instantly go pale after realizing Numeros got defeated by a mere knight. Kumal also hears that sound and asks his own bugler to sound the first victory of the battle. That sends the dwarves' morale through the roof. Back at the Katana Company, Iris reports the good news to Governor Velaco that the suppression team has won its first victory. Velaco has already heard it too, and says the Knights of Bartok did great work, but Ifan reveals the truth that they have lost contact with them, and that hits Velaco like a shock. He cannot believe the Elf Knights would lose to mere bandits. Alako clarifies that they were not mere bandits but a mercenary group hiding their identity, just like Johan claimed. She also shows him a paper that just arrived, saying the Bullhead mercenaries confessed that all of this was instigated by the Baron of Ainbeck. Velaco reads that it is from the captain of the Bullhead mercenaries, the Minotaur, and if he is admitting those charges, then that means he was captured alive. He wonders who in the world could do something that absurd. Alako smiles and proudly says there is already someone who can do absurd things like that. It's our protagonist. The subjugation team returns to Marcel. As Johan arrives, Sutulga and Godin both rush over to meet him. Sutulga appreciates him for working so hard and says he should rest for a bit. Meanwhile, Godin cannot contain his excitement and says he heard Johann just swung his mace and took down 50 men in one strike. Our guy tells him not to exaggerate, but deep down he wants him to gas it up as much as possible so Veliko can hear it too. Kumal shows up and says it is not exaggeration at all. Johann deserves every bit of praise, because the way Johann charged straight at the enemies had set all of their hearts on fire. Johann accepts the praise nicely and hopes Veliko will look on him favorably too. The captains of the monasteries also show up and praise his tactics. Valian says that if it were not for Johann, they would have walked straight into the bushes. She says there are not many knights who excel at tactics. On top of that, she was impressed by his character because he actually spared the enemy commander. Johann modestly says the Minotaur was not much of a villain once he fought him. Besides, there was no need to kill him. But she says a Minotaur possesses overwhelming combat strength. He could wipe out an entire mercenary group on his own. Even for them, a head-on fight would have been hopeless. Even if he showed the intent to surrender, an ordinary knight would have cut off his head for the achievement of killing a hero slayer. That would still be true even if he was only a half Minotaur. But Johann did not do it. Respecting an enemy's life is a rare virtue. This time Johann really feels they are glazing him too much, and says he kept him alive because it was necessary. So this kind of praise is making him a little embarrassed. Suilga cuts him off and asks if he knows how many people that half Minotaur slaughtered. When humility goes too far, the one praising him ends up feeling awkward. In that case, Johann eagerly accepts all of their praise and thanks. Bro switches gears real fast. The second he realizes being too humble is making things weird, Komal fires everyone back up again with his remarkable words. Just then, an injured man appears outside, and he seems to be a messenger from Gustav. And from the look of him, he is definitely not here with good news. He kneels before Johann and begs him to send reinforcements because they were attacked by a troll. The scene then shifts to Gustav's group, led by those weird-haired twins. They fiercely chase after the mercenaries and kill them on the spot. But they do not feel as much joy from the killing as they expected, which is kind of wild. One of the twins tells the others to go wipe everyone out as repayment since they owe the trading company. Count Batroc said the same thing. Without having other choice, Gustav orders everyone to keep chasing the fleeing enemy and annihilate them. He also tells them to strip away anything that looks valuable, and anyone who pockets loot for themselves will be punished. After saying that, they all move forward except the main guys. Gustav gets off his horse and notices the place is damp and marshy, which is creepy enough already and basically perfect for bandits to hide in. Just then, someone from his group comes back with a bloody body. Before that man can even ask them for help, something smashes him from behind. Gustav and his ugly banged guys finally start panicking when they see a troll show up in front of them. Well, that is what happened. Back in the present, that man confesses they fell into a trap set by those bastards. The bandits disappeared, and then the troll descended on them. Johann already knew it was a trap to lure them in, but he did not see anything about a troll in that weird Baron's letter. That man begs them to help Gustav and his idiots. Kumal then asks what they should do now, and the captains of the monastery leave that decision to him. Johann asks what kind of creature a troll is because it will be easier to decide once they know that. Valian has defeated a troll before, but she honestly tells him it is a being no human can stand against without the help of God. Its hide is harder than rock and its muscles are like ropes made of steel. Its monstrous strength, which comes from that overwhelming size, is beyond what humans can endure. The worst part is its healing power. No matter how much it gets pierced, it heals right away. Gustav and his fellows almost lose hope and start straight up snotting from horror. That messenger guy cuts in and says this is not the time for that, so please help them. Johann asks Valian what they should do now. She leaves the decision to Kumal, but says she is afraid that even if they run at full speed, Gustav and his guys may have already entered their eternal rest, which leaves the messenger guy shocked. Kumal apologizes to him and refuses to send a rescue party. Their mission is not over yet, and besides, even if they send one, there is no guarantee Gustav is still alive. But our Pookie decides to go there alone and says it will not be a big problem if he leaves, while great warriors like them stay here. Kumal tries to talk sense into him and says going there might be meaningless and would put himself in danger too. But Johann pushes back and asks what if they are still alive. He says he cannot just stand there and watch them die, and if even one of them is alive, then it is worth rescuing them. Hearing those compassionate words, the captains of both monasteries fill with tears. Johann bows before Kumal and asks him to send him. Kumal lets out a breath through his nose and says Johann always finds a way to surprise him. Then he decides to form a rescue party. He asks Suedelga just how obvious and pious Johann's character is, and Suedelga starts sweating and says Johann's motive is obvious to him now. He is right. Johann is a cunning man, and his world revolves around money only. He believes the troll is strong, but the elves are not weak either, and if they hurry, they might still be able to pull off a rescue. He heard those elves are from Urangs and are loaded, so he plans to squeeze a huge payout out of them as a reward. Duke Mayhem lights a candle inside the tent and tells his partners in crime that the elf knights have fallen right into their trap. If the elf knights of Arang get wiped out like that, then the relationship between the city magistrate of Marcel and Arang is done for. Janina tells him not to celebrate yet. They still did not manage to lure in the main punitive force, and the bullhead mercenaries surrendered too easily. She says they spent a serious amount of gold coins on those bullhead mercenaries, so she wants to know what even happened for them to fold like that. The weird Baron tells her they were disposable from the very beginning, so he does not really care what became of them. He says his real plan is written in a letter with a royal crest on it. Then he asks how Janina's troll is doing. He heard trolls are weak to fire, and if those elf knights figure that out, their whole plan is cooked. Janina tells them she stationed the troll in a damp place with more humidity than most areas, so even torches barely light there and ordinary fire will not do anything to it. She says those elves are going to meet their fate in the abyss of darkness. Yeah, these people are still out here plotting like full-time villains. However, they do not know they are the villains in the story, and our protagonist already has a special fire. He came with Valian, and she carries a torch burning with holy magic using Iena's fire. It is a spell passed down through their monastery for generations, and is mainly used when exterminating monsters. She has hunted trolls with this fire before. A troll's rapid healing ability can be suppressed with Iena's fire, and thanks to that they were able to kill the troll. Johann asks her if this fire is different from normal fire. She tells him the casting speed changes depending on the scale, but once it catches, it will not go out even in water and burns whatever it seizes to the very end. It is a flame of purification that incinerates the impure according to the caster's will. Johann sees some resemblance between this fire and white phosphorus. But anyways, he praises her and compliments that she is impressive in many ways and is running at the same pace as the horse. She replies that is the result of receiving God's grace and training every day. Johann feels reassured having her with them since he was a little worried about going with such a small rescue group. He plans to just draw the troll's attention and then rescue the elf knights. Those knights have brains, so there is no way they would keep fighting a monster that regenerates endlessly, and they are probably hiding somewhere. But our Pookie is wrong here. Gustav tells his men not to hide no matter what, and to maintain formation, they have to kill the troll and seize the honor. Bro is still chasing glory even when the situation is fully cooked. Cutie Karamov finds something ahead in the damp area, and it turns out to be the horses of those elf knights. Just then they hear screaming from behind, and Johann realizes his prediction was wrong. Those idiots have been fighting the troll this whole time. But that is actually good news to Valian because it means they are still alive. She tells him flames of this level cannot handle the troll, so he needs to give her some time. But our meathead boy just rushes forward to buy time for her, and tells Karamov to herd the horses that ran off. She worries about Johann, but right now making enough flame is what matters most. She plants her sword into the ground, and together with the other knights, she begins a ritual that looks pretty clean and eye-catching. At the same time, Gustav finally shows some guts and rushes forward to graze the troll's arm, but it heals instantly. Gustav is already in rough shape and starts cussing at the whole situation. As the troll growls again, he goes back into his fighting stance. Still, he realizes the morale of his soldiers is almost gone, and his companions are exhausted, so he decides to keep this standoff going. But then one of the twins steps forward and decides to use himself as a scapegoat, telling Gustav to leave him there and run away with the men while he deals with the troll. Gustav tells him not to be absurd, but the troll notices the twin and turns around to smash him into bloody ketchup. But nothing happens. Instead, they see a spear piercing through its thick steel-like arm, and that shocks the elves because now they are wondering who in the world pulled that off. Just then, Johann shows up on his horse and tells Gustav not to stand there blankly, and to hurry up and run.